Mic check. Check, 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 check. Okay. Bum 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 ba 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 ba. Don't know these people. If they're actual fucking people, they can request an unban. Gator, don't play that shit. Dun 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 dun. Waiting. Do 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 do. Dun dun da 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 da. Hopefully everybody's ready for this. We are going to attempt to finish book 2 out of 54 for the Horus Heresy today. I said we would. I am a man of my word. And so here we are now. Just waiting on the usual folks to get here. Show up, you know. All that fun stuff. Hopefully everybody's having a good day at least. Dude. Bum 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 bum. Maybe they'll show up. Maybe they won't. I don't know. I'm not a wizard in that sense to where I can figure it out. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. Come on now, kid. You can do it. Bum 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 bum. Oh, it's going to be a quiet day, I think. What is it, Tuesday? I think it is, yeah, because Thursday is the 13th when the Chaos Dwarves comes out for Total War Warhammer 3. So, that being said, I honestly believe that we should probably just get into it. You know, little Horus Heresy stuff here, and I'll greet people as they show up. So we're on part 2, the Plague Moon. So it's chapter 6. How's the music in comparison? I think the music's really setting the tone here, so that's good. Keep waiting for ads, but I forget that I bought Spotify. So here we are, chapter 6, Land of Decay, Dead Things, Glory of Terra. The Astartes spread out through the fog, moving as swiftly as the bogging conditions allowed and following the source of the Vox signal. Horus led from the front, a living god marching tall through the stinking quagmires and rank swamps of Davin's moon. Untroubled by the noxious atmosphere, he disdained the wearing of a helmet, his superhuman physique easily able to withstand the airborne poisons. 4 blocks of Astartes marched phalanx-like into the mist, with each member of the Mournval leading 200 warriors. Behind them came the soldiers of the Imperial Army, company after company, red-jacketed warriors with gleaming lasguns and silver-tipped lances. Each man was equipped with a rebreather apparatus after it was discovered that their mortal constitutions were unable to withstand the moon's toxic atmosphere. Initial landings of armor proved to be disastrous. Tanks sank into the marshland and dropships found themselves caught in the sucking mud. Though, the greatest of all the engines of war were those that emerged from the Mechanicum landers. Even the Astartes had paused in their advance to watch the descent of the 3 monstrously huge craft. Slowly dropping through the yellow skies in defiance of gravity like primeval monoliths. The blackened hulks traveling on smoking pillars of fire as their colossal retros fought to slow them down. Even with such fiery deceleration, the ground shook with the hammer blow of their impacts, geysers of murky water thrown hundreds of meters into the air, along with blinding clouds as the swamps flashed to steam. Massive hatches blew open, and the motion-resistant scaffolding fell away as the titans of Legio Mortis stepped from their landing craft and onto the moon's surface. The D's array led Death's Hand and Zester's Sword. Warlord titans with long fluttering honor rolls hung from their armored thorax. Each thunderous footstep of the mighty titan sent shockwaves through the swamps for kilometers in all directions. Their bastion legs sinking several meters through the marshy ground to the bedrock beneath. Their steps churned huge gouts of mud and water. Their appearance that of awesome gods of war, come to smite the War Master's enemies beneath their mighty tread. Loken watched the arrival of the Titans with a mixture of awe and unease. Awe for the majesty of their colossal appearance. Unease for the fact the War Master felt it necessary to deploy such powerful engines of destruction. The advance was slow going, trudging through clinging mud and stinking brackish water, all the while unable to see much more than a few dozen meters. The thick fog banks deadened sound such that something close might be inaudible, while Loken could clearly hear the splash of warriors from Luxidre's men far to his right. Of course he couldn't see them through the yellow mist, so each company kept in regular box contact to try and ensure they weren't separating. Loken wasn't sure it was helping though. Strange groans and hisses, like the expelled breath of a corpse, bubbled from the ground and blurred shadow forms moved in the mist. Each time he raised his bolter to take aim in readiness, mist would part and an armored figure in the green of the Sons of Horus or the steel gray of the Word-Bearers would be revealed. Erebus had led his warriors to Davin's moon in support of the War Master, and Horus welcomed their presence. The mist gathered in thickness with unsettling speed, slowly swallowing them up until all Loken could see were warriors from his own company. They passed through a dark forest of leafless dead trees, the bark glistening and wet-looking. Loken paused to examine one, pressing his gauntlet to the surface and grimacing as its bark sloughed off in wet chunks. Writhing maggots and burrowing creatures curled and wriggled rotted sapwood. These trees, dead. What about them? Asked Vip. I thought they were dead, but they're not. They're diseased, rotten with. Vippus shrugged and carried onwards. And once Loken was struck by the certainty that something terrible had happened here, and looking at the diseased heartwood of the tree, he wasn't sure that it was over. He wiped his stained gauntlet on his leg armor and set off with Vippus. The eerily silent march continued through the fog. Assisted by the servo muscles of their armor, the Astartes quickly began to outpace the soldiers of the Imperial army, who were finding the going much more difficult. Mournville, said Loken over the intersuit link. We need to slow our advance. We're leaving too big a gap between ourselves and the army detachments. Then they need to pick up the pace, returned Abaddon. We don't have time to wait for lesser men. We're almost at the source of the Vox. Lesser men, said Axmon. Be careful, Ezekiel. Starting to sound like Eidolon now. Eidolon, that fool would have came down here on his own to gain glory, snarled Abaddon. I'll not be compared to him. My apologies, Ezekiel. You're obviously nothing like him, deadpanned Axamond. Loken listened with amusement to his fellow Mournfall's bantering, which, together with the quiet of Davin's moon, began to reassure him that his concerns over their deployment here might be unfounded. He lifted his armor boot from the swamp and took another step forward, this time feeling something crack under his step. Glancing down, he saw something round and greenish, white. Something blah 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 blah. I'm just making sure the music ain't too loud. Glancing down, he saw something round and greenish white bob upwards in the water. Even without turning it over, he could see it was a skull. The paleness of bone wreathed in necrotic strands of rotten flesh and muscle. A pair of shoulders rose from the depths behind it, and the spinal column exposed beneath a layer of bloated green flesh. Loken's lips curled in disgust as the decomposed corpse rolled onto its back, its sightless eye sockets filled with mud and weed. Even as he saw the rotted cadaver, more bobbed to the surface, no doubt disturbed from their resting places at the bottom of the swamps by the footfalls of the Titans. He called a halt and opened his link to his fellow commanders. Once again, as yet more bodies, hundreds now floated to the surface of the swamp. Gray and lifeless meat still clung to their bones, and the impacts of the Titans' footfalls gave their dead limbs a horrid animation. "This is Loken," he said. "I found some bodies." "Are they Temba's men?" asked Horus. "I can't tell, sir," answered Loken. "They're too badly decomposed. It's hard to tell. I'm checking now." He slung his bolter and leaned forward, gripping the nearest corpse and lifting it from the water. Its bloated, rancid flesh was alive with wriggling motion, burrowing carrion insects and larvae nesting within it. Sure enough, moldering scraps of uniform hung from it, and Loken wiped a smear of mud from its shoulder. Barely legible, beneath the scum and filth of the swamps, he found a sewn patch bearing the number 63 emblazoned. over the outline of a snarling wolf's head. Yes, 63rd Expedition, confirmed Loken. They're Tembas, but Loken had never finished his sentence as the bloated body suddenly reached up and fastened its bony fingers around his neck, its eyes filled with a lambent green fire. Loken, said Horus as the link was suddenly cut off. Loken. Something amiss? Asked Torgadon. I don't know yet, Tarek, answered the War Master. Suddenly the hard bangs of bolter fire and a whoosh of flame units could be heard from all around them. Second company, shouted Torgadon. Stand to, weapons free. Where's it coming from? Bellowed Horus. Can't say, replied Torgadon. The mist playing merry hell with the acoustics. Find out, ordered the War Master. Torgadon nodded, demanding contact reports from all companies. Garbled shouts of impossible things came over the link, along with the loud bark of heavy bolter fire. Gunfire sounded to his left, and he spun to face it. His bolter raised before him. He could see nothing but the staccato flashes of weapon fire and the occasional blue streak of a plasma shot. Even the external senses of his armor were unable to penetrate the creeping mist. Sir, I think we... Without warning, the swamp exploded as something vast and bloated erupted from the water before him. Its gangrenous, rotten flesh barreled into him, its bulk sufficient to knock him onto his back into the swamp. Before he went under the dark water, Torgadon had the fleeting impression of a yawning mouth filled with hundreds of fangs and glaucous cyclopean eye beneath the horn of a yellowed bone. I don't know, the command net just went crazy, said Morderati Primus Harukin in response to the Princeps' Turnit's question. The external surveyors had suddenly and shockingly filled with returns that hadn't been there a second ago, and his Princeps had demanded to know what was going on. We'll find out, damn you, ordered Turnit. The War Master's out there. Main guns spooled up and ready to fire, reported Moriarty Primus Titus Cassar. We need a damn target first. I'm not about to fire into that mess without knowing what I'm shooting at, said Turnit. If it was Army, I'd risk it, but not a Stardaze. The bridge of the D's array was bathed in a red light. His 3 command officers seated up upon their control seats on a raised dais before the green glow of the tactical plot. Wired into the very essence of the Titan, they could feel its every motion as though it were their own. Despite the mighty war machine beneath him, Jonah Arukin suddenly felt powerless as this unknown enemy arose to engulf the Sons of Horus, expecting armored opposition and an enemy they could see. They had been little more than a focus for the Imperial forces to rally around so far. For all the Titans' overwhelming superiority and firepower, there was little they could do to aid their fellows. Getting something, reported Cassar. Incoming signal. What is it? I need better information than that, damn you, shouted Turnit. Aerial contact, signals firming up, fast moving and heading towards us. Is it a Stormbird? No, sir. All Stormbirds are accounted for in the deployment zone. I'm not picking up any military transponder signals either. Turnit nodded. Then it's hostile. Do you have solution, Arukin? Running it now, Princeps. Range, 600 meters in closing, said Cassar. God Emperor, protect us. It's coming right for us. Arukin, that's too damn close. Shoot it down. Working on it, sir. Work faster. The dense mist made looking through the frontal windshield pointless. Nevertheless, there was an irresistible fascination in looking out at an alien world. Not that there was much or indeed anything to see. Thus, Pertinella's first impressions upon breaching the upper atmosphere were of disappointment. Having expected exotic vistas of unimaginable alien strangeness. Instead, they had been buffeted by violent storm winds and could see nothing but yellow skies and banks of fog that seemed to be gathered around another unremarkable patch of brown swampland ahead. Though the War Master had politely but firmly declined her request to travel to the surface with the warriors of the Spear Tip, she had been sure there was a glint of mischief in his eye. Taking that for a sign of tacit approval, she had immediately gathered Maggard and her flight crew in the shuttle bay in preparation for descent to the moon below. Her gold-skinned landing skiff launched in the wake of the army dropships, losing itself in the mass of assault craft heading to the moon's surface. Unable to keep Where did it go? I lost my spot. Shit. Ass. Unable to keep pace with the invasion force, they had been forced to follow the emission trails and now found themselves circling deep in a soup of impenetrable fog that rendered the ground below virtually invisible. Getting some returns from up ahead, my lady, said the first officer. I think it's the spear tip. At last, she said, get as close as you can, then set us down. I want to get out of this mist so I can see something worth writing about. Yes, ma'am. Pertinella settled back into her seat as the skiff angled its course towards the source of a surveyor returned, irritably altering the position of her restraint harness to try to avoid creasing the folds of her dress. She gave up, deciding that the dress was beyond saving, and returned her gaze to the windshield as the pilot gave a sudden yell of terror. Hot fear seethed in her veins as the mist before them cleared and she saw a huge mechanical giant before them. Its proportions massive and armored. Saw-toothed bastions and towers filled their vision, massive cannons and a terrible snarling face of dark iron. Throne, cried the pilot, hauling on the controls in desperate evasive maneuver as roaring fire and light horrifyingly filled the windshield. Pertinella's world exploded in pain and broken glass as the guns of the diesel ray opened fire and blasted her skiff from the yellow skies. Loken surged back in horror and disgust as the cadaver attempted to strangle the life from him with its slimy fingers. For something as apparently fragile as a rotted corpse, the thing was possessed of a fearsome strength, and he was dragged to his knees by the weight and power of the creature. With a thought, he flooded his metabolism with battle stims, and fresh strength surged into his... He gripped the arms of his... from its reeking... when a flood of dead fluids and wash of brackish blood. The fire died in the thing's eyes, and it flopped lifelessly to the... Pushed himself to his feet, took stock of the situation. His Astartes training suppressing any notion of panic or disorientation. From all around them, the bodies had previously thought to be lifeless, rising from the dark waters, launching themselves at it. Bolters blasted their flesh from their bodies and still kept coming, tearing at the yellow claws. More of the things were rising all around them, and got three down with his guts shattering skulls and exploding chests. Massive reactive Sons of Horus on me. Form on me. The warriors of the 10th Company calmly began pulling back to their captain, firing as they went, the necrotic horrors rising from the swamp like creatures from their worst nightmares. Hundreds of dead things surrounded them, moldering corpses, bloated, muttering abominations, single milky distended eye, scabrous horn sprouting from its forehead. What were they? Monstrous xeno creatures with the power to reanimate dead flesh? Or something far worse? Thick buzzing clouds of flies flew around them, and Loken saw an Astartes go down, the feeds on his helmet thick with fat-bodied insects. Warrior frenziedly tore off his helmet, and Loken was horrified to see flesh rotting away with an unnatural rapidity, skin graying and peeling away. Spark a bolter fire focus. He returned his attention to the battle before. Magazine. Headshots only, he cried, and he put another dead thing down. Bowl of ruined blackened bone and sloshing. The tide of the battle began to turn as more and more of the shambling down and stayed down. Green flesh thing, so grotesquely distended bellies, took more killing though. It seemed to Loken they evolved into water as they fell into the water of the sea. More shapes moved through. Thunderous roar of heavy cannon fire came from behind, followed by the bright flare of an eye above. Loken looked up to see the golden landings, trailing smoke and fire wobble in the sky. Though he had no time to wonder what a civilian craft was doing in a war zone, as yet more of the dead things climbed from the water. Yes, we are on the plague moon of Davin, and yeah, pretty dark and disgusting event that's transpiring. So, you know, there's that. Saying, you know, if anybody was curious what we're reading, it's right there behind me. Hopefully the music isn't overpowering it. Okay. Too close for bolters, he drew his sword and brought his monstrously toothed blade to life with the press of the activation stud. A ghastly thing of decomposed flesh and rotten meat hurled itself at him, and he swung his blade two-handed for its skull. The blade roared as it slew gobbets of wet gray meat spattering his armor, and he ripped the sword through the brain and to the groin. He swung at another creature, the green fire of its eyes flickering out as he hacked it in two. All around him, sons of Horus went toe-to-toe with the terrible creatures that had once been members of the 63rd Expedition. Rotten hands clamped onto his armor from beneath the water, and Loken felt himself being dragged down. He roared and reversed his grip on his sword, stabbing straight down into a leering skull and rotted faces. But incredibly, their strength was greater, and he could not resist their pull. "Garvey!" shouted Vippus, hacking enemies from his path as he forged through the swamp towards him. "Luke, help me!" cried Vippus, grabbing onto Loken's outstretched arm. Loken gripped onto his friend's hand, and he felt another set of hands grip him around the chest and haul him backwards. "Let go, you bastards!" Ray hauling with all his might. Loken felt himself rising and kicked out as the creatures finally scrambled back and clambered to his feet. Together he, Luke, and Nero fought with bludgeoning ferocity, although there was no shape to the battle now. There had ever been. Nothing more than butcher work, requiring no swordsmanship or finesse. His brute strength and determination not to fall. Bizarrely, Loken thought of Lucius, the swordsman of the Emperor's children, and how he would have hated this inelegant form of war. Loken returned his attention to the battle with Cedre and Vippus. In the fight, he was able to gain some space and time to reorganize. "Thanks, Luke, Nero, I owe you," he said in a lull in the fighting. Sons of Horus reloaded bolters and chunks of dead flesh from their swords. Sporadic bursts of gunfire still sounded from the swamp, and strobing flashes lit the fog with fiery bursts. Off to their left, Loken saw the burning pyre where the skiff had came down, and the flames acting as a beacon in the mist of the obscuring fog. "No problem, Garvey," Cedre, and Loken knew that he was green beneath his helmet. "You'll do the same for me before we're out of this shitstorm, I'll wager." "You're probably right, but let's hope not." "What's the plan, Garvey?" asked Vippus. Loken held up his hand for silence as he attempted to make contact with his Mournfall brothers and the War Master once more. Static and desperate cries filled the Vox, terrified voices of army soldiers and the damned gurgling voice that kept saying, "Blessed be the Nurglith," over and over. And then a voice cut across every channel, and Loken almost cried aloud in relief to hear it. "All sons of Horus, this is the War Master. Converge on this signal. Head for the flames." At the sound of the War Master's voice, fresh energy filled his tired limbs and hearts of the Astartes, and they moved off in good order towards the burning pillar of fire coming from the wrecked skiff they had seen earlier. Loken killed with a methodical precision, each shot felling an opponent. He began to feel that they finally had the measure of this grotesque enemy. Whatever fell energy bestowed animation upon these diseased nightmares was clearly incapable of giving them much more than basic motor functions and an unremitting hostility. Loken's armor was covered in deep gouges, and he wished he knew how many men he had lost to the loathsome hunger of the dead things. He vowed this Nurgleth would pay dearly for each of their deaths. She could barely breathe, her chest hiking as she drew in convulsive gulps of air from the respirator Maggard was pushing down against her face. Pertinella's eyes stung, tears of pain coursing down her cheeks as she tried to push herself into a sitting position. All she remembered was a fury of noise and light, a metallic shriek and a bone-jarring impact as the skiff crashed and broke into pieces. Blood filled her senses, and she felt excruciating pain all down her left side. Flames leapt around her, and her vision blurred with the sting of the atmosphere and smoke. "What happened?" she managed, her voice muffled through the respirator's mouthpiece. Maggard didn't answer, but then she remembered that he couldn't and twisted her head around to gain the better appreciation of their current situation. Torn-up bodies clothed in her livery littered the ground, the pilots and flight crew of her skiff, and there was a lot of blood covering the wreckage. Even through the respirator, she could smell the gore. Flowing banks of leprous fog surrounded them through the heat of the flames appeared to be clearing it. In their immediate vicinity, shambling shapes surrounded them, and relief flooded her as she realized that they would soon be rescued. Maggard spun, drawing his sword and pistol, and Pertinella tried to shout at him that he must stand down, but that these were their rescuers. Then the first shape emerged from the smoke, and she screamed as she saw its diseased flesh and the rotten innards hanging from its open belly. Nor was it the worst of the approaching things. Cavalcade of cadavers with bloated, ruptured flesh and bodies sloshed through mud and wreckage towards them, clawed hands outstretched. Back. Wreckage. The green fire in their eyes spoke of monstrous appetites, and Pertinella felt a gut-wrenching terror greater than anything she'd ever known. Only Maggard stood between her and the walking diseased corpses, and he was but one man. She had watched him train in the gymnasia of Kairos many times, but she had never seen him draw his weapons in anger. Maggard's pistol barked, and each shot blasted one of the shambling horrors from its feet. Neat holes drilled in its forehead. He fired and fired until his pistol was empty, and then holstered it and drew a long triangular bladed dagger. As the horde approached, her bodyguard attacked. He leapt, feet first at the nearest corpse, and neck snapped beneath the boot of a heel. Maggard spun as he landed, his sword decapitating a pair of the monsters, his dagger ripping the throat from another. His Carillion rapier darted like a silver snake, its glowing edge stabbing and cutting with incredible speed. Whatever it touched dropped instantly to the muddy ground, like a servitor with its Dautrina wafer pulled. His body was always in motion, leaping, twisting, and dodging away from the clutching hands of his diseased attackers. There was no pattern to their assault, simply a mindless host of dead things seeking to envelop them. Maggard fought like nothing she had ever seen, his augmetic muscles bulging and flexing as he cut down his foes with quick, lethal strokes. No matter how many he killed, there was always more pressing in, and they steadily forced him back a step at a time. The horde of creatures began to surround them, and Pertinella saw that Maggard couldn't possibly hold them all back. He staggered towards her, bleeding from a score of minor wounds. His flesh was blistering and weeping around the cuts that were unhealthily pallid to his skin despite his respirator gear. She wept bitter tears of horror as the monsters closed in, jaws opening wide to devour her flesh and grasping hands ready to tear her perfect skin and feast on her innards. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Great Crusade wasn't supposed to end in failure and death. A corpse with moldering, sagging skin lurched past Maggard, his blade lodged in the belly of a giant necrotic thing with green flesh that was thick with flies. He screamed as it reached for her. A deafening bang was thundered behind her, and the creature disintegrated in an explosion of wet meat and bone. Pertinella covered her ears as the thunderous roar of gunfire came again, and her attackers were torn apart in a series of rancid explosions, falling back into the fires of the skiff and burning with stinking green flames. She rolled onto her side, crying in pain and fear as the terrifying close volleys continued, clearing a path for the massive armored warriors of the Sons of Horus. The giant towered above her, reaching for her with his armored gauntlet. He wore no helmet and was silhouetted by the terrible red glow, his awesome bulk haloed by blazing plumes of fire and a pillar of black smoke. Even through her tears, the War Master's beauty and physical perfection rendered her speechless, though blood and dark slime covered his armor, and his cloak was torn and tattered. Horus towered like a god unleashed, his face a mask of terrifying power. He lifted her to her feet as easily as one might lift a babe in arms, while his warriors continued to slaughter the monstrous dead things. More and more sons of Horus were converging on the crash site, guns firing, drive the enemy back and forming protective cordon around the War Master. "Miss Vivar," demanded Horus, "what in the name of terror are you doing? I ordered you to stay aboard the Vengeful Spirit." She struggled for words. Still in awe of his magnificent presence, he had saved her. The War Master had personally saved her, and she wept to know his touch. "I had to come. I had to see. Your curiosity almost got you killed," raged Horus. "If your bodyguard had been less capable, you'd already be dead." She nodded dumbly, holding onto a twisted spar of metal to keep from collapsing as the War Master stepped through the debris towards Maggard. The gold-armored warrior held himself erect despite the pain of his wounds. Horus lifted Maggard's sword arm, examining the warrior's blade. "What's your name, warrior?" asked the War Master. Maggard, of course, did not answer, looking over at Pertinella for help in answering. "He cannot answer you, my lord," said Pertinella. "Why not? Doesn't he speak Imperial Gothic?" "He does not speak at all, sir. House Carpinus chaperones removed his vocal cords." "Why would they do that? He is an indentured servant of House Carpinus, and it's not a bodyguard's place to speak in the presence of his mistress." Horus frowned as though he did not approve of such things, and said, "Then you tell me what his name is." "He is called Maggard, sir. And this blade he wields? How is it that the slightest touch of his edge slays these creatures?" "It is a Carillion blade forged on ancient Terra, and said to be able to sever the connection between the soul and the body, though I have never seen it used before today." Music was a bit loud in my ear holes. "Whatever it is, I think it saved your life, Miss Vivar." She nodded as the War Master turned to face Maggard once more and made the sign of Aquila before saying, "You fought with great courage, Maggard. Be proud of what you did here today." Maggard nodded and dropped to his knees with his head bowed, tears streaming from his eyes at being so honored by the War Master. Horus bent down and placed the palm of his hand on the bodyguard's shoulder, saying, "Rise, Maggard. You have proven yourself to be a warrior, and no warrior of such courage should kneel before me." Maggard stood smoothly, reversing the grip of his sword and offering it, hilt first to the War Master. The yellow sky reflected coldly in his golden eyes, and Pertinella shivered as she saw the newfound devotion in her bodyguard's posture, an expression of faith and pride that frightened her, this intensity. The meaning of the gesture was clear. It said what Maggard himself could not. "I am yours to command." Thus assembled, the Astartes took stock of their situation. All four phalanxes had rendezvoused around the crash site as the attacks from the diseased and dead things ceased for the time being. Spear tip was blunted, but it was still an awesome fighting force and easily capable of destroying what remained of Temba's paltry detachment. Sidre volunteered his men to secure the pillars, and Loken simply waved his assent, knowing that Luke for more battle and for a chance to shine in front of the War Master. Bippus reformed the scouting parties, and Ulam Moy set up fire positions for his devastators. Loken was relieved beyond words to see that all four members of the Mournfall had survived the fighting, though Torgadon and Abaddon had both lost their helmets in the furious melees. Aximon's armor had been torn open across his side, and a splash of red, shockingly bright against the green of his armor, stained his thigh. "Are you alright?" Torgadon asked him, his armor stained and blistered as though someone had poured acid over the plates. "Just about," nodded Loken. "You?" "Yes, though it was a close run thing," conceded Torgadon. "Bastard got me underwater and was choking the life out of me. Tore my helmet right off. And I think I must have drunk about a bucket of that swamp water. Had to gut him with my combat knife. Messy. Torgadon's gene-enhanced body would be unharmed by the swallowing of water, no matter what toxins. It was a stark reminder of the power of these, that a warrior as fearsome as him could almost be overcome. Abaddon and Axamon had similar tales of close run things, and Loken desperately wanted the fight to be over. The longer the mission went on, the more it reminded him of Eidolon's abortive first strike on murder. Restored communications revealed the Byzant Janziers had suffered terribly under the assault from the swamp and had hunkered down in defensive positions. Not even the electrocytes of their disciplined masters were able to coerce them forward. The horrifying enemy had melted back into the fog, but no one could say with any certainty where the creatures had gone. The Titans of the Legio Mortis towered over the Astartes, the disarray reassuring the assembled warriors by simple virtue of its immensity. It was left to Erebus to point the way onward. He and his depleted warriors staggering into the circle of the light surrounding Pertinella Vivar's crashed skiff. The first chaplain's armor was stained and battered, its many seals and scripture papers torn from it. War Master, I believe we have found the source of the transmissions, reported Erebus. There is a structure up ahead. Where is it and how close? Demanded the War Master. Perhaps another kilometer west. Horus raised his sword and shouted, Sons of Horus, we have been grossly wronged here and some of our brothers are dead. Hi, Jess. You missed, like, the battle against zombies. How's your day going? How'd you sleep? Did you eat anything? Have you been drinking water? It is time we avenge them. His voice easily carried over the dead waters of the swamps, his warriors roaring their ascent and following the War Master, as Erebus and the Word-Bearers set into the mists. Fired with furious energy. I haven't been drinking. Why aren't you wetting your organs? That's the real question. You gotta drink water. You get on me to eat, you have to drink water. Hulk Haggis. We got the angry Scotsman in here. How you doing, buddy? I guess I can quit lurking on your stream now. How you doing, bud? How did That's our favorite beloved kilt-wearing Scotsman. Hulk Haggis. I still think it should have been Super Haggis for a name, but how did Ghost Recon Wildlands go? We're going to attempt to finish Book 2 out of 54 of the Horus Heresy today. So, basically, the Luna Wolves, now the Sons of Horus, landed on a moon called Davin. It's plagued by Nurgle, and they just fought a bunch of bloated-ass Nurgle zombies and stuff. But Jess, you have to drink water. Haggis, make sure you stretch your legs, drink water, change your socks, do all that good stuff. Yeah. But how was it? How was the Wild Lands? The Wild Lands. The Wild Lands. I'm a cactus? No, you have to drink water. Yo, went well. Lone Gamer may be dead on her permadeath run. You don't want to find out yet, but it's good all the same. Why y'all doing a permadeath run? That's not a good idea. But for those of you that came in with Hulk, I'm the Mad Mun. I'm a Facecam 2D streamer who basically does whatever the fuck he wants. And we read on stream here. As you can tell by the book title in the back. Gotta stay hydrated, and why not a nice challenge? I mean, if you want a real challenge, do Fallout 4 on the hardest difficulty, survival mode, where if you die, you gotta restart the game. There's no load your last save, that's it. That's all you get. You die, you have to start all over. Saying, you know. Mostly because I want to see you get pissed off as super mutants keep blowing your ass up. Alright, Jess, well, we'll be here. You know I'm going to keep on reading here eventually. I said we would, so we are. And, yeah, that's where we're at. I enjoy my, my reading of things. So, basically, if you get into the, I may defo may do that, be a good entertainment. Oh yeah, it would. It absolutely would. Truly, it would. But, so where we're at is, this is taking place in the Horus Heresy. This takes place, it starts off about 10, well, no, I'd say about 1,000 years before the 40k thing, because the Primarch for the Ultramarines is in stasis for 1,000 years after the end of the Horus Heresy. Then he wakes up and he's like, where's my father? Oh, your father's on stasis here on top of the Golden Throne. You get to rule in his stead now. Because, you know, Horus is a fucking cunt and threw a tantrum and caused this massive civil war. And so, we're basically going to be going through all the books steadily on stream. I have them all on my Kindle app, so I just basically, once I finish one, I re-download the next one. But, we got the haunting gothic pipe organs going in the background. It's a good time. I do enjoy reading quite a bit. There is that. Something. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna pick up where I left off now. Yeah, this'll do. No, yeah, this'll do. Fired with furious energy, the Astartes plowed through the sodden ground, ready to enact the War Master's wrath upon the vile foe that had unleashed such horrors upon them. So, the Sons of Horus landed on the moon of Davin, a spear tip, and what used to be like a desert rock, essentially, is now like a giant swamp. Like, it's been cursed by Nurgle, essentially. That's where we're at. Maggard and Pertinella went with them, none of the Astartes willing to retreat and escort them back to the army positions. Legion apothecaries tended their wounds, helped them through the worst of the terrain. Eventually, the mist began to thin, and Loki could make out the more distant figures of Astartes warriors through the smudges of fog. I got a stretch, thank you. The further they marched, the more solid the ground underfoot became. And as Erebus led them onward, the mist became thinner still. Then, as quickly as a man might step from one room to another, they were out of it. Behind them, the banks of fog gathered and coiled, like a theater curtain in a playhouse waiting to unveil some wondrous marvel. Before them was the source of the Vox transmission, rearing up from the muddy plain like a colossal iron mountain. Yugen Temba's flagship, the glory of Terra. Fuck. The Kindle app's frozen. Of course it would be. Of course it would. Yeah, alright. Chapter 7. Watch our backs. Collapse. The Betrayer. Rusted and dead, nearly 6 decades, the vessel lay smashed and ruined on the cratered mud flats. Its once mighty hull torn open and buckled almost beyond recognition. The towering Gothic spires, like the precincts of a mighty city, lay fallen and twisted. Buttresses and archways hung with decaying fronds and web-like vines. Its keel was on Paris. Tickets have gone on sale, so that means TwitchCon Vegas tickets are probably going to go on sale in June or April. I'm not going to be able to make it to Paris. It's not happening. Its keel was broken, as though it had struck the moon's surface belly first, and many of the upper surfaces had caved in. The decks below opened to the elements. Swaths of mossy greenery covered the hull, and her command spire spread into the sky, warped vanes and tall vox masts bending in the moaning wind. Loken thought this unbearably sad, that this should be the final resting place of such a magnificent vessel, seemed utterly wrong to him. Pieces of debris spotted the landscape, twisted hunks of rusted metal and incongruous personal items that must have belonged to the ship's crew had been ejected during the massive impact with the ground. Throne. Abaddon. How? Was all Axmon. It's the glory of Terra, all right, said Erebus. I recognize the warp array configuration of the command deck in Temba's flagship. Then Temba's already dead, said Abaddon in frustration. Nothing could have survived that crash. And who's broadcasting that signal? Asked Horus. It could have been automated, suggested Torgadon. It's been going for years. No. Loken shook his head. Signal only started once we breached the atmosphere. Someone here activated when they knew we were coming. The War Master stared at the massive shape of the ship. The massive shape of the wrecked spaceship, as if staring hard enough he could penetrate its hull and discern what lay within. We should go in, urged. Find whoever is inside and kill them. Loken rounded on the first chaplain. Go inside? Are you mad? We don't have any idea what might be waiting for us. 1,000 more of those things inside, or something even worse. What's the matter, Loken? Erebus. Or is now afraid of the dark. Loken stepped up to Erebus and said, You dare insult us, word-bearer? Erebus stepped up to meet Loken's challenge. Hornvolt took up a seat behind their new presence, gave the first chaplain pause. Instead of pursuing the matter, Erebus bowed his head and said, I apologize if I spoke out of turn, Captain Loken. Not only to erase the gross stink. Legion's honor is uphold, Erebus. Not for you to tell us how we must act. Horus decided the matter before further harsh words could be exchanged. We're going in, he said. Rippling fogbank followed the Astartes as they advanced towards the crashed ship. The Titans of the Legio followed behind. Their legs still wreathed. Loken kept steady, conscious of flashing water behind him. Though he told himself that they were just the normal sounds of this world, whatever that meant. They closed the gap. He drew level with the War Master and said, Sir, I know what you'll say, but I would be remiss if I didn't speak up. About what, Garviel? Asked Horus. About this, about you leading us into the unknown. Haven't I been doing that for the last 2 centuries, Horus? All the time we've been out into space. Hasn't it been to push back the unknown? That's what we're here for, Garviel. To render that which is unknown, known. Loken sensed the commander's superlative skills of misdirection at work and kept himself focused on the point. War Master had an easy way of steering conversations away from issues he didn't want to talk about. Sir, do you value the Mournful as counsel? Asked Loken, taking a different tact. Horus paused in his advance and turned to face Loken, face serious. Heard what I told that remembrance embarkation deck, didn't you? I value your counsel above all things, Garviel. Why would you even ask such a question? Because so often you simply use it for dogs, always baying for blood, having us play a role instead of allowing us to keep you Say what you have to say, Garviel, and I swear I will listen. With respect, sir, you should not be here leading. You should not be going into that vessel without proper reconnaissance. We have 3 of the Mechanicum's greatest war machines behind us. We not at least let them soften the target first. Horus chuck, you have a thinker's head on you, my. The wars are not won by thinkers. They are won by men of action. It's been too long since I wielded a blade and fought in such a battle. Against abomination, nothing more than our utter destruction. I told you on murder, that had I felt I could not take the field of battle again, I would have refused the position. Mournful would have done this thing for you. Carry your honor now. Think my shoulder's so narrow that I cannot bear it alone? Asked Horus. Loken was shocked to see genuine anger in it. You're going to Paris? Oh, look at that. You have a new thing there. TwitchCon 2023 Paris. And you had the one for Amsterdam as well. Nice. No, sir. All I mean is that you don't need to bear it alone. Horus laughed and broke the tension. His anger quite forgotten, he said, "You're right, of course, my son. My glory days are not over, for I have many laurels yet to earn." The War Master set off once more. "Mark my words, Garviel Loken. Everything achieved thus far in this crusade will pale into insignificance compared to what I am yet to do." Oh boy, hopefully the one for Vegas too. Well, maybe. All things in due time. I keep my eye on it. They're supposed to email me when they go on sale. And I'm still debating if I'm going to bring Mr. Man with me or ask if one of my neighbors can watch him. Don. I'm sure TwitchCon will be a fun time. Maybe. Hopefully. Possibly. Very likely. Alright, back to it. Oh. You also get a notification in Twitch too. Yeah, I haven't gotten anything yet. Despite the War Master's insistence on leading the Astartes into the wreck, he consented to Loken's plan of allowing the Titans of the Legio Mortis to engage the target first. All three mighty war engines braced themselves. At a command from the War Master, unleashed a rippling salvo of missiles and cannon fire into the massive ship. Glaring blooms of light and smoke rippled across the ship's immensity as it shuddered with each concussive impact. Fires caught throughout its hulls and thick plumes of arcid black smoke twisted skywards like signal beacons, as though the ship were trying to send a message to its former master. Once again, the War Master led from the front, mist following them like a smoggy cape of yellow. Loken could still hear noises from behind them, but with the thunderous footfall of the Titans, the crackling of the burning ship, and their own splashing steps, it was impossible to be sure what he was hearing. "Feels like a damn noose," said Torgadon, looking over his shoulder and mirroring Loken's thoughts perfectly. "I know what you mean. I don't like the thought of going in there, I can tell you that." "Not afraid, are you?" asked Loken, only half joking. "Don't be flippant, Garvey," said Torgadon. "I want you to think you're right. There's something not right about this." "I gotta lurk." "Okay, you know we'll be here. We'll still be reading." Loken saw genuine concern in his friend's face, unsettled at seeing the Joker Torgadon suddenly serious. For all his bluster and informality, Tark had good instincts, and they had saved Loken's life on more than one occasion. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "I think this is a trap," said Torgadon. "We're being funneled here, and it feels like it's to get us inside that ship." I said as much to the War Master. And what did he say? "What do you think?" "Ah," nodded Torgadon. "Well, you didn't seriously expect to change the commander's mind, did you?" "I thought I might have given him pause, but it's as if he's not listening to us anymore. Erebus has made the commander so angry at him, but he won't even consider any other option than going in and killing him with his bare hands." "So what do we do?" asked Torgadon, and once again, Loken was surprised. "We watch our backs, my friend. We watch our backs." "Good plan," said Torgadon. "I hadn't thought of that. And here I was, all set to walk into a potential trap with my guard down." That was the Torgadon that Loken knew and loved. Rear quarter of the crashed Glory of Terror reared up before them, its command decks pitched upwards at an angle, blotting out the diseased sky. It enveloped them in its dark, cold shadow, and Loken saw that getting into the ship would not be difficult. The gunfire from the Titans had blasted huge tears in its hulls, and piles of debris had spilled from inside, forming great ramps of buckled steel like rocky slopes before the walls of ba 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 ba. The War Master called a halt and began issuing his orders. Captain Cedre, you and your assaulters will form the vanguard. Loken could practically feel Luke's pride in such an honor. Captain Moy, you will accompany me. Your flame and melty units will be invaluable in case we need to quickly cleanse the area of or breach bulkheads. Moy nodded, his quiet reserve more dignified than Luke's eagerness to impress the War Master with this arduous. What are your orders, War Master? Asked Erebus. Those great armor word-bearers at attention behind their first chaplain and ready to serve. Erebus, take your warriors over to the other side of the ship, find a way in, and then rendezvous with me in the middle. If that bastard Temba tries to run, I want him crushed between. The first chaplain nodded at understanding, led his warriors off into the shadow of the mighty vessel. Then the War Master turned to the Mournville. Ezekiel, use the signal locator on my armor to form overlapping echelons around my left. Little Horus, take my right. Torgada and Loken from the rear. Secure this area and our line of withdrawal, understood? The War Master delivered the orders with his trademark efficiency, but Loken was aghast at being left to cover the rear of their advance. He could see that the others of the Mournville, especially Torgadon, were similarly surprised. This the War Master's way of punishing him for daring to question his orders, or for suggesting they should not be leading spear tip to be left behind? Understood, repeated Horus. All four members of the Mournville nodded their assent. Let's move out, snarled the War Master. I have a traitor to kill. Luke Cedre led the assaulters, their bulky backburners of their jump packs easily carrying them up towards the black tears in the sides of the ship. As Loken expected, Luke was first inside, vanishing into the darkness, with barely a pause. His warriors followed him and were soon lost to sight. As Abaddon and Axamon found other ways inside, clambering up the debris to reach the still smoking holes the Titans had torn. Axamon gave him a quick shrug as he led his own squads upwards. Loken watched them go, unable to believe that he would not be fighting alongside his brothers as they went into battle. The War Master himself strode up the pile of debris as easily as a man might ascend a gently sloping hill, Moy and his weapons specialist following in his wake. Within moments, they were alone on the desolate mud flats, and Loken could sense the confusion in it. He stood awkwardly, waiting orders to send them into the fight, but he had none to give them. Torgadon saved him, his stupefaction, bellowing out commands and lighting a fire under the Astartes left behind. They spread out to form a cordon around their position, Nero Vippus' scouts taking up position at the edge of the mist, and Breakspur climbing up the slopes to guard the entrances to the Glory of Terra. Just what exactly did you say to the commander? Asked Torgadon, squelching back through the mud towards him. Loken cast his mind back to the words that had passed between himself and the War Master since that foot on Davin's moon. Searching for some offense that he might have given, he could find nothing serious enough to warrant his and Torgadon's exclusion from the battle against Temba. Nothing, he said, just what I told you. This doesn't make any sense, said Torgadon, attempting to wipe some mud from his face, but only serving to spread it further across his features. I mean, why leave us out of all the fun? I mean, come on, Moy. Barrelman's competent officer, said Loken. Competent? Scoffed Torgadon. Don't get me wrong, Garvey. I love Varellum like a brother, but he's a file officer. You know it, and I know it. While there's nothing wrong with that, and Emperor knows we need good file officers, he's not the sort the War Master should have at his side at a time like this. Loken couldn't argue with Tarek's logic, having had the same reaction upon hearing the War Master's orders. I don't know what to tell you, Tarek. You're right, but the commander has given his orders and we are pledged to obey him. And when we know those orders make no sense? Loken had no answer to that. The War Master and Moy led the van of the spear tip through the dark and oppressive interior of the Glory of Terra. Its arched passageways canted at unnatural angles, its bulkheads warped and rusted with decay. Brackish water dripped through sections open to the elements, and a reeking wind gusted through the creaking hallways like a cadaver's breath. Diseased streamers of black fungus and dangling fronds of rotten matter brushed against their heads and helmets, leaving slimy trails of sticky residue behind. The perforated floors were treacherous and uneven, but the Astaris made good time pushing ever upwards through the halls of putrefaction towards the command decks. If you run onions under cold water, it helps keep the tear effect from happening. So you cut it, run it under cold water for a bit. You let it soak in it. It has to be cold water though. Regular static lace communication with Seadre's vanguard informed them of his progress ahead of them. The ship, apparently lifeless and deserted, even though the vanguard was relatively close, Seadre's voice was chopped with interference. Every third word was so unintelligible. On the road, the lightning strikes. Rose cold behind. Dun, 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 dun. The deeper into the ship they penetrated, the worse it got. Ezekiel, said the War Master, opening the Vox Maidon's Gorget. Progress report. Abaddon's voice was barely recognizable, as crackling pops and wet hissing overlaid it with meaningless babble. Moving the low rat decks. Keep. We have blank master. Horus tapped his Gorget. Ezekiel. Damn it. War Master turned to Moy and said, try and raise Erebus before returning to his own attempts at communication. Hold on. I just got a text message from my lawyer about a payment to make real quick. Luckily, only one needed to be done. Well, that's good. Give me a second here. I gotta email my lawyer attorney here real quick a payment showing that that I did in fact submit the payment with the check. It's just probably gonna take a bit because the payment was submitted on a Friday after 4 p.m. Sorry, emailing my attorney here real quick. Then we'll get back to our story. Luckily, only one needed to be cut. So, that's a plus. Hold on. Sorry, guys. I'm like, because this payment was for $3,675, and they're like, the payment hasn't come through yet. And I'm like, well, it was after 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Friday. It typically takes 3 to 5 business days for a check to be processed. We're only on Tuesday. It's not like it's a tiny amount of money either, so that's why I'm not gonna be like, oh, here, let me just pay it again. If it was like $100, I'd be like, sure, I'll pay it again. And if I overpay, then you just take $100 off the total of the lawyer fees. That reminds me, tomorrow I gotta call and keep fighting to get Papa Mun's medical bills paid. Okay. Again, sorry. I'm trying to get this all sorted out. She could have just called me, but instead, just like, meh. Nah, that's fine. Okay. Where did I leave off? Spear tip. The War Master turned to Moy and said, try to raise Erebus. Before returning to his own attempts at communication. Little Horus, can you hear me? More static followed. Uninterrupted save for a faint ordnance deck. Slow. Shells. Making safe, but make grass. Nothing from Erebus, reported Moy. But he may be on the other side of the ship by now. If the interference we are getting between our own warriors is anything to go by, it's unlikely our armor links will be able to reach him. Damn it, repeated the War Master. Well, let's keep going. Sir, ventured Moy. Might I make a suggestion? Come on now. Let me... If it's that we turn back, forget it. Earl, my honor and that of the Crusade has been impunged, and I'll not have it said that I turned my back on it. I know that, sir, but I believe Captain Loken is correct. We are taking a needless risk here. Life is a risk, my friend. Every day we spend from Terra is a risk. Every decision I make is a risk. We cannot avoid risk, my friend, or if we do, we do nothing. If the highest aim of a captain were to preserve his ship, he would keep it in port forever. You're a fine officer, Varellum, but you do not see heroic opportunities as I do. But Sir protested more. We cannot maintain contact with our warriors, and we have no idea what might be waiting. Forgive me if I speak out of turn, but delving into the unknown like this does not feel like heroism. It feels like guesswork. Horus leaned in close to me and said, Captain, you know as well as I do that the whole art of war consists of guessing what is on the other side. I understand that, sir. And Moy, Horus was in no mood for interruption. Ever since the Emperor appointed me in War Master, people have been telling me what I can and cannot do. And I tell you, I'm sick and tired of it, Snap. People don't like my opinion. That's their problem. I am the War Master and I have made up my mind. We go on. Wheeling shriek of stagger abruptly sliced through the darkness. Luke Cedre's voice came over the armor link, as clearly as if he stood next to them. Throne, they're here, shouted Cedre. Then everything turned upside down. Loken felt it through the soles of his boots, the tremendous rumbling that seemed to come from every foundation of the moon. He turned in horror, hearing metal grind on metal with a deafening screech, and watching geysers of mud spout skyward as buried portions of the starship tore themselves free of the sucking mud. The upper sections of the vessel plummeted towards the ground, and the entire ship began tipping, the colossal rear section arcing downwards with terrible inevitability. This doesn't fit. There we go. Everyone get clear, bellowed Loken, as the massive weight of metal gathered speed. The stardust scattered from the falling wreck, and Loken felt its massive shadow like a shroud of his armor senses, shut out the roaring noises of the starship's collapse. He looked back in time to see the wreckage slam into the ground with the force of an orbital strike, the superstructure crumbling under the impact of its own weight, and hurling lakes of muddy water through the air. Loken was tossed like a leaf blown by the shockwave, landing waist deep in a stagnant pool of greenish scum, disappearing beneath the surface. Rolling to his knees, he saw tsunamis of mud rippling out from the vessel, and watched as dozens of his warriors were buried beneath the now brownish sludge. The power of the wrecked starship's impact spread from the crater it had gouged in the mud. A brackish rain of muddy water drizzled down, smearing his helmet's visor and reducing visibility to no more than a few hundred meters. Loken climbed to his feet, clearing the action of his bolter, and he realized the shockwave had dispersed the sulphurous fog that had been their constant companion since landing on the accursed moon. Sons of Horus, stand ready, he shouted, seeing what lay beyond the fog. Hundreds of the dead things marched relentlessly towards them. Not even the armor of the Primarch could withstand the impact of a falling starship. Horus grunted as he pulled the twisted spar of jagged iron from his chest. Sticky blood coated his armor, the wound sealing almost as soon as he had withdrawn the metal. His Jean and Hain's body could easily withstand such trivial punishment, but despite the spinning and falling through the decks of the ship, he remained perfectly oriented and in balance around the sloping deck. You remember the sounds of tearing metal, the clang of metal on armor, and the sharp crack of bones snapping as the Starday's warriors were thrown around like children in a funhouse. Sons of Horus, he shouted. Varellum! Only mocking echoes answered him. He cursed as he realized he was alone. The vox mic on his gorget was shattered, brass wires hanging limply from the empty socket. He angrily ripped them away. Moy was nowhere to be seen, and his squad members were similarly scattered beyond sight. Quickly taking stock of his surroundings, Horus could see that he lay partially buried in metal debris on the armorium vestibule, its ceiling bulging and cracked. Icy water dripped in a cold rain, and he tipped his head back to let it pour over his face. He was close to the bridge of the ship, assuming it hadn't sheared off on impact with the ground, for surely there could be no other explanation for what had happened. Horus hauled himself from beneath the wreckage and checked to make sure he was still armed. For surely there could be no other explanation for what had happened. Horus hauled himself from beneath the wreckage and checked to make sure he was still armed, finding a sword hilt protruding from the debris of the vestibule. Pulling the weapon clear, its golden blade caught what little light there was and shone as though an inner fire burned within it. Forged by his brother, Ferrus Manus of the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, it had been a gift to commemorate Horus's investiture as War Master. He smiled as he saw the weapon remained as unblemished as the day Ferrus had held it out to him. The light of adoration in his steel-gray eyes, and Horus had never been more thankful for his brother's skill at the forge anvil. The deck creaked beneath his weight, and he suddenly began to question the wisdom of leading this assault. Despite that, he still seethed with molten rage for Yugen Temba, a man whose character he had believed in, and whose betrayal cut his heart with searing knives. What manner of man could betray the oath of loyalty to the Imperium? What manner of base cur would dare betray him? The deck shifted again, Horus easily compensating for the lurching motion. He used his free hand to haul himself up towards the gaping doorway that led to the warren of passageways that riddled a ship this size. Horus had set foot on the Glory of Terror only once before, nearly 70 years ago, but remembered its layout as though it had been yesterday. Beyond this doorway lay the upper gantries of the armorium, and beyond that, the central spine of the ship that led through several defensive choke points to the bridge. Horus grunted as he felt a sharp pain in his chest and realized that iron spar must have torn through one of his lungs. Without hesitation, he switched his breathing pattern and carried on without pause, his eyesight easily piercing the darkness of the vessels. This close to the bridge, Horus could see the terrible changes wrought upon the ship, its walls coated in loathsome bacterial slime that ate at the metal like an acidic fungus. Ripping fawns of waving, leech-like organisms suckled at oozing pustules of greenish-brown matter, and an unremitting stench of decay hung in. Horus wondered what had happened to them. Had the tribes of the moon unleashed some kind of deadly plague on the crew? These the means that Erebus spoke of? He could taste the air was thick with lethal bacterial filth and biological contaminants, though none were even close to virulent enough to trouble his incredible metabolism. With the golden light of his sword to illuminate the way, Horus negotiated a path around the gant, listening out for any signs of his warriors. The occasional distant crack of gunfire or clang of metal told him that he wasn't completely alone, but the whereabouts of the battles was a mystery. The corrupted inner structure of the ship threw phantom echoes and faraway shouts all around him until he decided to ignore them and press on alone. Horus passed through into the ship's central spire. The deck warped and canted at an unnatural angle. Flickering glow globes and sputtering power conduits sparked and lit the arched passageway with blue electrical fire. Broken doors clanged against their frames, and the rocking motion of the ship making the sound like funeral bells. Ahead he could hear a low moaning, the shuffle of calloused feet. The first sounds he could clearly identify. They came from beyond a wide hatchway, toothed blast doors juddering open and closed like the jaws of some monstrous. Crushed debris prevented the doors from closing completely, and Horus knew that whatever was making the noises stood between him and his ultimate destination. Some trick of the diffuse, probing light through jittering shadows from the mouth of the hatchway. Flickering after images danced on his retinas, though the light came from a picked projector running in slow motion. As the hatchway rumbled closed once more, a clawed hand reached out and gripped smeared metal. Long, dripping yellow talons sprouted from the hand. the flesh of a wasted arm, maggot-ridden and leprous. Another hand pushed through and clamped onto the metal, wrenching open the blast doors with a strength that belied the frailness of the arms. The sensation of fear was utterly alien to Horus, but when the horrifying sources of the sound was unrevealed, he was suddenly seized with the conviction that perhaps his captains had been right after all. A shambling mob of rotten flesh-famine victims, shuffling gates carrying forwards in a droning phalanx of corruption. Creeping sensation of hidden power pulsed from the hunger, wasted bodies and swollen bellies. A buzzing clouds of flies surrounded their cyclopean horned heads. Sonorous doggerel spilled from their bloated and split lips. The Horus could make no sense of the words. Green flesh hung from their exposed bones, and although they moved with leaden monotony of the dead things, Horus could see coiled strength in their limbs, terrible hunger in each of the monster's cataract eyeball. The creatures were less than a dozen meters, but their images were blurred and wavering, though tears misted his vision. He blinked rapidly to clear it and saw their swords, rusted and dripped with contagion. "Well, you're a handsome bunch, and no mistake," said Horus, raising his sword, throwing himself forward. His golden sword clove into the monsters with fire like a fiery comet, each blow hacking down a dozen or more without effort. Spatters of disease caked the walls, and the air was thick with the stench of fecal matter, and each monster exploded with rotten bangs of flesh at his every blow. Filthy claws tore at Horus with every weapon. Elbows smashed skulls from knees and shattered spines, and struck his down as if they were mindless automatons in the training. Horus did not know what manner of creatures they were, but they had obviously never faced a being as mighty as a Primarch. He pushed further into the central spine of the starship, hacking a path through hundreds of organ-draped beasts. Behind him lay the ruins of his passing, shredded meat that reeked of decay and pestilence. Before him lay scores more of in the bridge of the glory of Terra. He lost track of time, the primal brutality of the fight capturing the entirety of his attention. His sword strikes mechanical and bludgeoning. Nothing could stand before him, and with each blow the War Master drew closer to his goal. The corridor grew wider as he pushed through the heaving mass of cyclopean monsters. The golden sheen of his sword and the flickering, uncertain lights of the corridor making it appear that his enemies were becoming less substantial. His sword chopped through a distended belly, ripping it wide open in a gush of stinking fluids, but instead of bursting open, the meat of the creature simply vanished like greasy smoke in the wind. Horus took another step forwards, but instead of meeting his foe's head with brute ferocity, the corridor was suddenly and inexplicably empty. He looked around, and where once there had been a host of diseased creatures bent on his death, now there were only the reeking remains of hacked-up corpses. Even they were dissolving like fat on a griddle, vanishing in hissing streamers of green smoke so dark it was almost black. "Throne," hissed Horus, bolted by the sickening sight of liquefying meat, finally recognizing the for what it was. A charnel house of the warp, a spawning ground of the immaterial. Horus felt fresh resolve fill his limbs as he got closer to the multiple blast doors that protected the bridge. More certain than ever that he must destroy Yugen Temba. He expected yet more legions of the warp-spawned things, but the way was eerily quiet. The silence punctuated only by the sounds of more gunfire, which he was now sure was coming from beyond the hall. Patter of black water on his armor. Horus made his way forward cautiously, brushing sparking cables from his path. One by one, the sealed blast doors slowly rumbled open at his approach. The whole thing reeked of a trap, but nothing could deny him his vengeance now, and he pressed onward. Stepping onto the bridge of the glory of Terra, Horus saw that its colonnaded immensity had been changed from a place of command to something else entirely. Moldering banners hung from the highest reach, long-dead corpses stitched into the fabric of each. Even from here, Horus could see that in gray uniform expedition. He wondered if these poor souls stayed true to their oaths. It will be avenged, my step further. The tiered workstations were smashed and broken, their inner workings ripped out and rewired in some bizarre new way. Meters, thick bundles of coiled wire rising into the darkness of the large sea. Throbbing energy pulsed from the cables, and Horus realized that he was looking at the source of the Vox signal that had so perturbed Loken on the way in. Indeed, he'd fancy that he could still hear the words of that damn voice whisper in the air like a sea that would turn your tongue black where you fell it. Ergleth. Just over and over. Then he realized that it wasn't some auditory echo from the ship's Vox, but a whisper from a human throat. Horus's eyes narrowed as he sought the source of the voice, his lip curling in revulsion as he saw the massively swollen figure of a man standing before the captain's throne. Little more than a heaving mass of corrupulent flesh and terrific stench of rank meat rose from his fleshy immensity. Flying things with glossy black bodies infested every fold of his skin, and scraps of gray cloth were stuck to his green-gray flesh. Gold apotulates glinting and silver frogging hanging limply over his massive belly. One hand rested in a massive gluttonous mess of an infected wound in his chest, while the other hand held a sword, the glitter sheen like diamond. Horus dropped to his knees in anger and sorrow as he saw the slumped corpse of an Astartes warrior sprawled before the decaying splendor of the bloated figure. Barula Moy, his neck obviously broken, his sightless eyes fixed upon the decaying corpses hanging up from the banners. Even before Horus lifted his gaze to Moy's killer, he knew Guntemba, the betrayer. Chapter 8, Falling God. Loken could scarcely remember a fight where he and his warriors had expanded all their ammunition. Each Astartes carried enough shells to sustain them for most types of engagement. Since no shot was wasted and each target would normally fall to a single bolt. The ammo hoppers were back at the drop site and there was no way they could get through to them. War Master's resolute advances at Loken's full capacity of rounds had long been thankful for Aximon's subsonic rounds. Satisfyingly lethal explosion within the bodies of the dead thing. Bro, don't they ever stop? Gasped Torgon. I must have killed 100 or more of the damn thing. Probably keep killing the same one, replied Loken, shaking his sword. Matter if you don't destroy the head, they get back up again. Cut down a half a dozen or more with bullets. Torgon nodded and said, "Hold on, the lead." Loken gripped onto a more solid piece. Titans began yet another deadly strafing mass of rotted monsters. Like the monstrous giants that haunt the barbarous, Titans fog with fists of thunder and fire, but explosions by explosion hurled the cadavers into the air, and the crashing steps of the mighty worm crushed them. Their hammer blow foot. The very air thrummed with the vibrations of the Titan's attack, avalanches of debris and mud sliding from the glory of Terra. Each explosion, a titanic footstep. The dead things had gained the slopes of the rubble in Detrius that led into the starship 3 times, but 3 times they had sent them back, first with gunfire, when the ammunition had run out, with blades and brute strength. Each time they killed hundreds of their enemies, but each time a handful of Astartes was dragged down and pulled beneath the waters of the swamps. Under normal circumstances, the Astartes would have had no trouble in dealing with these abominations, but with the War Master's fate unknown, they were brittle and on edge, unable to think or fight with their customary ferocity. Loken knew exactly what they were feeling because he felt it too. Unable to raise the War Master, Aximond, or Abaddon, the warriors outside the Hulk were left paralyzed and in disarray without their beloved leader. Oh, I just popped my back and it felt so good. I rolled my shoulder blades back and it was absolutely delicious and amazing. Sorry, just reading the message that my attorney sent me. I'm not... I mean, you figure at some point the whole it'll process in 3 to 5 business days so we get through, but I guess not. Anyways, hopefully I help my little brother not make something poisonous. Well, it's spaghetti. It's kind of hard to fuck up. Temba, said the War Master, rising to his... Been Easter month. It's... Well, yeah, it was a holiday. I completely... But it was on a Friday. I don't know if yesterday counted as a business day. Considering I got mail, I'm going to assume so. Temba, said the War Master, rising to his feet and marching towards his erstwhile planetary governor. With each step, he saw further evidence of Yugen Temba's treachery. Clotted blood on the edge of his sword, and a fierce grin of anticipation. Where once had been the loyal and upright follower, Horus now only saw a filthy traitor who deserved the most painful of deaths. A fell light grew around Temba, further revealing the corruption of his flesh, and Horus knew that nothing of his former friend was left in the diseased shell that stood before him. Fuck up the sauce, there's not much to save it. Add more salt. Friday was Good Friday. Banks are still open Friday here, at least as far as I know. We'll find out. If it's not there by next Monday, I'll start asking more questions. I'm not going to worry about it right now. My bank account says it was paid, so if it doesn't go through, then the money should come back to me. Not really going to worry about it, honestly. Banks and mail and stuff still came on Friday. I got mail yesterday, so I'm going to assume Good Friday doesn't count as a holiday in the States. Horus wondered if this was what Loken had experienced beneath the mountains of 6319. The horror of a former comrade succumbing to the warp. Horus had known of the bad blood between Jubal and Loken, now understanding that such enmity, however trivial, had been the chink in Jubal's armor by which the warp had taken him. Thank you for the lurk, Smug. What flaw had been Temba's undoing? Pride, ambition, jealousy? Xylif? Welcome in. Thank you for the follow, Xylif. We are reading the Horus Heresy. We're going to attempt to finish Book 2 today. Welcome in. How was your weekend? How was your Easter? And how many vehicles do you own? I lost my place. Sorry. Okay, I found it. I just saw Warhammer 40k and followed. Sorry. No, that's okay. You're welcome. And I kind of get derailed quite a bit, as Jess knows. Vehicles too. Nice. How was your Easter? As Jess knows, I tend to get derailed pretty easily, and I tend to hyper-focus on things a lot. But, welcome in. I'm the Madman. I'm a 2D Facecam streamer. I basically do what I want, and we read on stream. We are currently working through all 54 books of the Horus Heresy. We're currently about halfway through book 2. And then next week we'll start book 3. Either we're finishing book 2 today or tomorrow. Friday is Skyrim Day. Thursday we're going to do Total War Warhammer 3 because the Chaos Dwarves comes out. And yeah. It's what we're doing. Welcome in. We're currently on chapter 8, part 2 of book 2. House, 1 boat, 1 electric lawnmower, and a double garage. Nice. But yeah, Jess, as for that money situation, if it's not there by Monday, I'll start asking more questions. Worst case scenario, it just gets kicked back, and I gotta pay the bill again. Not a big deal. Just to get you up to speed, the Luna Wolves are now known as the Sons of Horus. They've landed on a moon called Davin that's plagued by Nurgle, and the Word Bearers brought the War Master Horus there. And we're on chapter 8, Fallen God. The bloated monster that had once been Yugen Temba looked up from the corpse of Moi and smiled, thoroughly pleased with his work. War Master, said Temba, each syllable glottal and wet as though spoken through water. Don't you dare address me by such a title, abomination. Abomination? Hissed Temba, shaking his head. Don't you recognize me? No, said Horus. You're not Temba. You're warp-spawned filth, and I'm here to kill you. You are wrong, War Master, it laughed. I am Temba, the so-called friend you left behind. I am Temba, the loyal follower of Horus you left to rot on this backwater world while you went on to glory. Mine, can you see the Eiffel Tower badge? I can, yeah. It says TwitchCon Paris 2023. I can, yes, it's there. And then you got a cool star thing too for 2 months subscribing, and then TwitchCon Paris. You might have to get rid of your star thingy, but I can see it. Got the Eiffel Tower badge. Horus approached the dais of the captain's throne and dragged his eyes from Temba to the body of Verola Moi. Blood streamed from a terrible wound in his side, pumping energetically onto the stained floor of the bridge. The flesh of his throat was purple and black, a lump of broken bone pushing through at the bruised skin where his neck had been snapped. A pity about Moi, said Temba. He would have been a fine convert. Don't say his name, warned Horus. You are not fit to give it voice. If it consoles you, he was loyal until the end. I offered him a place at my side with the power of Nergleth filling his veins with its immortal necrosis, but he refused. He felt the need to try to kill me. Foolish, really. The power of the warp fills me and he had no chance at all, but that didn't stop him. Admirable loyalty, even if it was misplaced. Horus placed a foot on the first step of the dais, his golden sword held out before him, his fury at the beast drowning out all other All he wanted to do was throttle the life from this treacherous bastard with his bare hands. He retained enough sense to know that if Moi had been killed with such apparent ease, then he would be a fool to discard his weapon. We don't have to be enemies, Horus, said Temba. You have no idea the power of the warp, old friend. It is like nothing we saw before. It's beautiful, really. Its power, Horus climbing another step, elemental and uncontrollable, and therefore not to be trusted. Elemental? Perhaps, but it is far more than that, Temba. It seethes with life, with ambition and desire. You think it's a wasteland of raging energy that you bend to your will, but you have no idea of the power that lies there. The power to dominate, to control, and to rule. I have no desire for such things, said Horus. You lie, giggled Temba. I could see it in your eyes, old friend. Your ambition is a potent thing, Horus. Do not be afraid of it. Embrace it, and we will not be enemies. We will be allies embarking upon a course that will see us masters of the galaxy. The galaxy already has a master, Temba. He is called the Emperor. Then where is he? He blundered across the cosmos in a matter of barbarian tribes of ancient Terra, destroying anyone who would not submit to his will, and then left you to pick up the pieces. What manner of leader is that? He is but a tyrant by another name. Horus took another step, and was almost atop the dais, almost within striking distance of this traitor who dare profane the name of the Emperor. Think about it, Horus, urged Temba. The whole history of the galaxy has been a gradual realization that events do not happen in an arbitrary manner, but they reflect an underlying destiny. That destiny is chaos. Chaos? Yes! Shouted Temba. Say it again, my friend. Chaos is the first power in the universe, and it will be the last. When the first ape creatures bashed each other's brains out with bones or cried to the heavens in the death throes of a plague, they fed and nurtured chaos. The blissful release of excess and the glee of intrigue. All is grist for soul mills of chaos. So long as men endures, so too does chaos. Horus reached the top of the dais and stood face to face with Temba, the man he had once counted as his friend and comrade in this great undertaking. Though the thing spoke with Temba's voice, and its stretched features were still those of his comrade, there was nothing left of that fine man, only this wretched creature of the warp. You have to die, said Horus. No, for that is the glory of Nergaleth, chuckled Temba. I will never die. We'll soon see about that, snarled Horus, and he drove his sword into Temba's chest, the golden blade easily sliding through layers of blubber towards the traitor's heart. Horus ripped his sword free in a wash of back blood and stinking pus, the stench almost too much for even him to bear. Temba laughed, apparently untroubled by such a mortal wound, and brought up his own sword, its glinting fractured blade like patterned obsidian. He brought his blade to his blue lips and said, "The War Master Horus." With the speed that was unnatural in its swiftness, the tip of the blade speared for the War Master's throat. Horus threw up his sword, deflecting Temba's weapon barely a centimeter from his neck, and took a step backwards as the traitor lurched towards him. Recovering from the surprise attack, Horus gripped his sword two-handed, blocking every lethal thrust and cut that Temba made. Horus fought like never before, his every move to parry and defend. Yugen Temba had never been a swordsman. So where this sudden horrifying skill came from, Horus had no idea. The two men traded blows back and forth across the command deck, the bloated form of Yugen Temba moving with a speed and dexterity quite beyond anything that should have been possible for someone of such vast bulk. Indeed, Horus had the distinct impression that it was not Temba's skill with the blade that he was up against, but the blade itself. Go. Not me, Jess. I'm not playing Fortnite again. I had fun yesterday, but I'm not gonna do it again. As much fun as it was, it's not for me. He ducked beneath the decapitating strike and spun inside Temba's guard, flashing his sword through his opponent's belly, thick gruel of infected blood and fat spilling onto the deck. The dark blade darted out and struck his shoulder guard, ripping from his armor in a flash of purple sparks. Horus danced back from the blow, and as the return stroke arced towards his head, he dropped and rolled away as Temba turned his bloody, carven body back towards him. Any normal man would have died a dozen of times or more, but Temba seemed untroubled by such killing wounds. Temba's face shone with glistening sweat, and Horus blinked as the monster's outline wavered, like those of the cyclopean monsters that he had fought in the ship's central spine. Frantic motion shimmered, and he could see something deep within the monstrously swollen body. The faint outline of a screaming man, his hands clasped to his ears, and his face twisted in rictus grin of horror. Trailing his innards like gooey ropes, Yugen Temba descended the steps of the dais, like a socialite making her entrance at one of the Mercian balls. Horus saw the cursed sword gleaming with a terrible hunger, its edges twitching in Temba's hand as though aching to bury itself in his flesh. Doesn't have to end this way, Horus, gurgled Temba. We need not be enemies. Yes, said Horus. We do. You killed my friend and you betrayed the Emperor. It can be no other way. Even before the words were out of his mouth, the smoky gray blade streaked towards him, and Horus threw himself back as the rager's sharp edge grazed his breastplate and cut into the keramite. Horus backed away from Temba, hearing twin cracks as monstrously bloated Raider's ankle bones finally snapped under his weight. Horus watched as Temba dragged himself forward unsteadily, splintered ends of bone jutting from the bloody flesh of his. No normal man could endure such agony, and Horus felt a flickering ember of compassion for her friend stir within his breast. No man deserved to be abused, though, and Horus vowed to end Temba's suffering, seeing again the jagged, off-after image sputtering within the alien flesh of the warp. Should have listened to you, he whispered. Temba didn't reply. The glittering blade wove patterns in the air, but Horus ignored it. Too seasoned a warrior to be caught by such an elemental trick. Once again, Temba's blade reached out for him, but Horus was now gaining a measure of its hunger to do. It attacked without thought or reason, only the simple lust to destroy. He lopped his own blade around the quillions of Temba's sword and swept his arm out in a disarming before closing death blow. Instead of releasing the blade for fear of a shattered wrist, Temba, however, retained his grip on the sword, hip twisting in the air and plunging Horus's. Both blades pierced flesh at the same instant. Horus is tearing through Temba's chest and into his heart. Lungs. Temba stabbed into the muscle of Horus's shoulder where his armor had been torn away. Horus yelled in such pain, his arm burning with the shimmering sword's touch, and reacted with all the speed the Emperor had bred into him. The golden sword slashed out, severing Temba's arm just above the elbow. The sword clanged to the deck where it twitched in the grip of the severed arm with a loathsome life. Temba wavered and fell to his cry of agony. Horus reared above his foe with his sword upraised. His shoulder ached and bled, but victory was now his, and he roared with anger, ready to enact his vengeance. Through the red mist of anger and hurt, he saw the pathetic, weeping and soiled form of Yugen Temba, stripped of loathsome power of the warp that had claimed him. Bloated and massive, the dark light in his eyes was gone and replaced by tears of pain as the enormity of his betrayal crashed. What have I done? Asked Temba, his voice little more than a whisper. The anger went out of Horus in an instant, and he lowered his sword, kneeling beside the dying man that had once been his trusted friend. Guttering sobs of agony and remorse racked Temba's body, and he reached up with his remaining hand to grip the War Master's armor. Forgive me, my friend, he said. I didn't know. None of us did. Hush now, Yugen. It was the warp. The tribes of the moon must have used it against you. They would have called it magic. No, I'm so sorry, wept Temba, his eyes dimming as death reached up to claim him. They showed us what it could do. I saw the power of it. I saw beyond the warp. I saw the powers that dwell there, and Emperor, forgive me, I still said yes to it. There are no powers that dwell there, Yugen, said Horus. You were deceived. No, said Temba. I was weak and I fell willingly, but it is done now. Great evil in the warp. There is great evil in the warp, and I need you to know the truth of chaos before the galaxy is condemned to the fate that awaits it. What are you talking about? What fate? I saw it, War Master. The galaxy is a wasteland. The Emperor dead and mankind in bondage to a nightmarish hell of bureaucracy. All his grim darkness and all his war. Only you have the power to stop this. You must be strong, War Master. Never forget that. Horus wanted to ask more. Watch impotently. The spark of life fled Yugen Temba. Shoulders still burning with fire, Horus rose to his feet, marched over to the pure, rewired consoles, throbbing bundle of cables, and up to the. With an aching cry of loss and anger, he severed the cables with one mighty blow. They flopped and spun like landed sparks, and green fluid spurting from the internal tube and cables, and Horus could tell that the damnable Vox transmission had ceased. Horus dropped his sword, clutching his injured shoulder. He sat on the deck next to Yugen Temba's dead body and wept for his lost friend. Loken hacked his sword through another corpse's neck, dropping the moldering revenant around as Fillmore pressed him behind it. He and Torghadan fought back to back, their swords coated in the flesh of the dead things, as they were pushed further and further up the slopes of the metal that led inside the starship. Their warriors fought desperately, each blow leaden and exhausted. The titans of the Legio Mortis crushed what they could and sporadically raked the base of the rubble with sprays of gunfire, but there was no stopping the horde. Dozens of Astartes were dead, and there was still no word from the forces that had entered the glory of Terra. Garbled Vox transmissions from the Bison Janzir seemed to indicate that they were finally moving forward, but no one could be sure as to where exactly they were moving. Loken fought with robotic movements, his every blow struck with mechanical regularity rather than skill. His armor was dented and torn in a dozen places, but still he fought for victory despite the utter desperation of the cause. That was what Astartes did. They triumphed over insurmountable odds. Loken had lost track of how long they had been fighting, the brutal sensations of this combat having dulled his senses to all but his next attacker. "We have to pull back into the ship," he shouted. Torghadan and Neurovippus nodded, too busy with their own immediate situation to respond verbally, and Loken turned and began issuing orders across the Intersuit Vox, receiving acknowledgments from all his surviving squad commanders. He heard a cry of anger, recognizing it as belonging to Torghadan. Turned with his sword raised, a mob of stinking cadavers swamped the top of the slopes, overwhelming the Astartes gathered there in a frenzy of clawing hands and biting jaws. Torghadan was borne to the ground in the mouths of the corpses, fastened to his neck, and his arms were dragging him down. "No," shouted Loken as he leapt towards the furious combat. He shoulder-charged in amongst them, sending bodies flying down the slopes. His fist crushed skulls, his sword hacked dead things, and gauntlet fists thrust up through gray flesh and grabbed it, feeling the weight of an armored Astartes behind it. "Hold on, Tarek," he ordered, falling on his friend's arm. Despite his strength, he couldn't free Torghadan and felt grasping limbs enveloping his legs and waist. He clubbed with his free hand but couldn't kill enough of them. Hands tore at his head, smearing blood across his visor and blinding him as he felt himself falling. Loken thrashed in vain, breaking dead things apart, but unable to prevent himself and Torghadan from being pulled apart. Claws tore at his armor, the unnatural strength of their enemies piercing his flesh and drying his precious blood. A grinning skull-faced monster landed on his chest, face to face with him, and its jaws snapped shut on his visor. Unable to penetrate the armored glass, rivulets of muddy saliva blurred his vision and worked his jaws up and down. Loken headbutted the thing from his chest and rolled onto his front to gain some purchase. Lost his grip on his sword and bellowed in anger as he finally began to free himself from their intolerable grip. Loken fought with every ounce of his strength, finally gaining fight and rising to it. All around him, warriors of the Astartes struggled with the dead thing that they were undone. Then broke. Every one of the dead things dropped to the ground with a soft sigh of relief. Seconds before, the area around the starship had been a furious battle of warriors locked in life or death struggles. Now it was an eerily silent graveyard. Bewildered, Astartes picked themselves up and looked around at the inert, lifeless bodies surrounding them. "What just happened?" asked Neurovippus, disentangling himself from a pile of bludgeoned corpses. "Why have they stopped?" "No, okay. Drained of your spoons already, smug?" "What just happened?" asked Neurovippus. I don't know." Loken shook his head. He had no answer to give him. "It doesn't make any sense." "Rather they got back up?" "No, don't be dense. I just mean that if someone was animating these things, then why stop now? They had us." Loken shuddered. For someone to wield that power that could defeat the Astartes was a sobering thought. All the time they had crusaded through the galaxy, there had been nothing that could stand against them for long. Eventually, the enemy's will would break in the face of the overwhelming superiority of the Space Marine. But this happened when they met a foe with a will as implacable as their own. Shaking himself free of such gloomy thoughts, he had been issuing orders to dispose of the dead things, and they began hurling them from the wreckage, hacking or tearing heads from shoulders lest they reanimate. Eventually, Axamon and Abaddon led their warriors from the wreckage, battered and bloody from the ship's fall, but otherwise unharmed. Erebus too returned, his horde bearers similarly abused, but also largely unharmed. There was still no sign of Seadre's men or the War Master. "We're going back in there for the War Master," said Abaddon. "I'll lead." Loken was about to protest, but not as he saw the unshakable resolve in Ezekiel's face. "We all go." Hey there, I'm reading. This is how I'm getting my day. I woke up with no spoons, and I was like, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna just read until I take a nap. I did manage to go to the gym. It was back in by day. They found Luke Seadre and his men trapped in one of the lower decks, hemmed in by fallen bulkheads and tons of debris. It took a better part of an hour to move enough of it to grant Luke's assaulters their freedom. On pulling Seadre from his prison, all he could say was, "They were here, monsters with one eye. Came out of nowhere, but we killed them, all of them. Now they're gone." Luke had suffered casualties. 7 of his men were dead, and his perpetual grin was replaced by a vengeful expression that reminded Loken of a defiant young boy. Black, stinking residue coated the walls, and Seadre had a haunted look to him that Loken did not like at all. It reminded him of Euphrates Keeler in the moments after the warp thing that had just taken Jubal almost under. The Seadre and his warriors in tow, the Mournful pressed on with Loken leading the way, finding signs of battle scattered throughout the ship. Bolter impacts, sword cuts that led inexorably towards the ship's bridge. "Loken," Axamon, "I fear what we might find ahead. You should prepare yourself." "No," said Loken, "I know what you're suggesting, but I won't think of that. I can't. You have to be prepared for the worst." "No," said Loken, louder than he intended. "Would know if what?" asked Torg. "If the War Master was dead." Thick silence enveloped them as they struggled to come with terms with such a hideous idea. "Loken's right," said Abaddon. "We would know if the War Master was dead. You know we would know. You, of all of us, would feel it, little Horus." "Hope you're right, Ezekiel." "Oh, thank you for the stretch, Zai." "Enough of this damn misery," said Torgadon. "All this talk of death, and we haven't found hide nor hair of the War Master. Save your gloomy thoughts for the dead that we already know about. Besides, we all know that if the War Master was dead, the sky would have fallen, eh?" "It's Genshin update night, so tomorrow I'll probably play along." "Well, glad that you enjoy Genshin." That lightened their mood a little, and they pressed on, making their way along the central spine of the ship, passing through the juddering bulkheads and along corridors with flickering lights until they reached the blast doors that led to the bridge. Loken and Abaddon led the way, with Axamon, Torgadon, and Seadre bringing up the rear. It was almost dark, only a soft light from ruptured consoles providing any illumination. The War Master sat with his back to them, his glorious plate armor dented and filthy, cradling something vast and bloated in his lap. Loken drew level with the War Master, grimacing and saw a grotesquely swollen human head in his commander's lap. A great puncture wound pierced the War Master's breastplate, and a bloody stab wound on his shoulder leaked blood down the armor of his arm. "Sir," said Loken, "you alright?" "Oh gee, what's a speedrun competition, and what's the prize?" The War Master didn't answer, instead cradling the head of— "You can shout your mom out if you want, Jess, I'm fine with that." The War Master didn't answer, instead cradling the head of what Loken could only assume was Yugen Temba. His bulk was immense, and Loken wondered how such a monstrously fat creature could possibly have moved under his own strength. The Mournful joined Loken, shocked and horrified at the War Master's appearance, and at this terrible place. They looked at one another with growing unease, quite not knowing what to make of this bizarre scene. "Sir?" said Axamon, kneeling before the weeping War Master. "I failed him," said Horus. "I failed them all. I should have listened, but I didn't. Now they're all dead. It's too much." "Sir, we're going to get you out of here. The dead things have stopped attacking. We don't know how long that's going to last, so we need to get out of this place and regroup." Horus shook his head slowly. "They won't be attacking again. Temba's dead and I cut the Vox signal. I don't know how exactly, but I think it was part of what was animating those poor souls." Abaddon pulled Loken aside and hissed, "We need to get him out of here, and we can't let anyone see the state he's in." And what is the speed run? I need the deets. I need the deets. Wait. Oh, there it is. The competition is more for fun. It's basically see who can speedrun the new area and exploration the fastest. There's no fun in that if you've already done it. I think for that competition to be legitimate, you have to guarantee that you didn't watch any how-to walkthroughs on YouTube and never been there before. But Loken knew that Abaddon was right. See the War Master like this would break the spirit of every Astartes who saw him. The War Master was an invincible god of war, a towering figure of legend that could never be brought low. See him humbled, so would be a blow to the morale of the 63rd expedition, and it might never recover from. Gently, they prized Yugen Temba's massive body away from the War Master, lifted their commander to his. Loken slung the War Master's arm over his shoulder, feeling the warm wetness against his face from the blood that still dripped from Horus's arm. Between them, he and Abaddon walked the War Master from the bridge. "Wait, Master." His voice weak and low. "I'll walk out of this place on my own." Reluctantly, they let him go, and though he swayed a little, the War Master kept his feet despite the ashen pallor of his face and the obvious pain he was in. War Master spared a last look at Yugen Temba and said, "Gather up Verilum. Get out of here, my sons." Maggard slumped against the steel bulkhead of the Glory of Terra, his sword covered in the black fluids from the dead things. Hurt and Ella fought to hold back tears at the thought of how close they had all come to death on this bleak Emperor's forsaken moon. Sheltered behind the bulkhead where Maggard had thrust her, she had heard, rather than seen, the desperate conflict that raged outside. The war cries, the sound of monsterized blades tearing into wet meat, the percussive booms and explosive flashes of light from Titan's weapons. Her imagination filled in the blanks, the thought of gut-loosening terror filled her from head to toe. Picture glorious combat and heroic duels between towering Astartes giants and the corrupt foes that sought their destruction. The update that is done tonight updates the map and opens new areas, so besides from the leaks, no one has seen it before. Nice. But you also know that as soon as the update's done, within an hour or two, there's already going to be like how-to YouTube videos. Her breathing came in short, convulsive gasps as she realized she had just survived her first battle, but with that realization came a strange calm. Her limbs stopped shaking as she wanted to smile and laughed. She wiped her hand across her eyes, smearing the coal that lined them across her cheeks like tribal war paint. Hurt and Ella looked over at Maggard, seeing him now for the great warrior he truly was, barbaric and bloody and magnificent. She pushed herself to her feet and leaned out beyond her sheltering bulkhead to look at the battlefield below. It was like a scene from one of Kelland Roget's landscapes, and the sublime vision took her breath away. The fog and mist had lifted, and the sun was already breaking through to bathe the landscape in its ruddy red glow. The pool of swamp water glittered like shards of broken glass spread across the landscape. The three magnificent titans of the Legio Mortis watched over squads of Astartes armed with flamers, putting the corpses of dead things to torch, and pyres of fallen monsters burned with a bright blue-green light. It was already forming metaphors and imagery she would use, the Emperor's warriors taking his light into the dark places of the galaxy, or perhaps the Astartes were his angels of death bringing his retribution to the unrighteous. Words had the right epic tone, but she sensed that such imagery still lacked some fundamental truth, sounding more like propaganda slogans than anything. This was what the Great Crusade was all about, and the fear of the last few hours was washed away in a swelling wave of admiration for the Astartes and the men and women of the 63rd Expedition. Find someone that takes a free day off work to run the whole thing. Jesus, fuck, that is a dedication. That. If you take a day off work to speedrun a game, that forgoes dedication and enters into the realm of obsession and insanity. Like, I like my video games, but I've never taken a day off work just to pay a new patch. Yeah, no, that's poor practice. I do not approve of such things. She turned as she heard heavy footfalls. The officers of the Mournville were marching towards her, a plate-armored body borne upon their shoulders. Levity she had witnessed in them earlier, now utterly absent. Each one's face, even the Joker Torgadon's, was serious and grim. The cloaked figure of the War Master himself followed behind them, and she was shocked, rigid at his beaten appearance. His armor was torn and gashed with foulness, and blood spatters matted his face and arm. What happened? Gasped Captain Loken passed by her. Whose body is that? Be silent, he snapped, and be gone. No, said the War Master. She is my documentarist, and if that is to mean anything, then she must see us at our worst as well as at our best. Sir, began Abaddon, but Horus cut him off. I'll not be argued with on this, Ezekiel. She comes with us. Bertinella felt her heart leap at this inclusion and fell into step with the War Master's party as they began their descent to the ground. The body is that of Veril Moy, captain of my 19th company, said Horus, his voice weary and filled with pain. He fell in the line of duty and will be honored as such. You have my deepest sorrows, my lord, said Bertinella, her heart aching to see the War Master in such pain. Was it Yugen Temba, she asked, fishing out her data slate and Nemo Quill. Did he kill Captain Moy? Horus nodded, too weary even. Temba is dead, you killed him? Yugen Temba is dead, answered. He died a long time ago. I don't know exactly what I killed in there, but it wasn't him. I don't understand. I'm not sure I do either, said Horus, stumbling as he reached the bottom of the slope of debris. He reached out a hand to steady him before realizing what a ridiculous idea that was. Her hand came away bloody and wet. He saw that the War Master still bled from a wound in his shoulder. I ended the life of you, but damn me if I didn't weep for him afterward. Wasn't he an enemy? I have no trouble with my enemies, Bar, said Horus. I can take care of my enemies in a fight, but my so-called allies, my damned allies, they're the ones who keep me walking the floors at night. Legion of apothecaries made their way towards the War Master as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. He allowed the Nemo Quill to inscribe his words anyways. She saw the look she was getting from the Mournville, but ignored them. Did you speak to him before you slew him? What did he say? He said that only I had the power to stop the future. Master. Voice suddenly faint and echoing, coming from the end of a very long time. Puzzled, she looked up in time to see the War Master's eyes roll back in their sockets and his legs buckle beneath. She screamed, reaching out with her hand toward him, knowing that she was powerless to help him, but needing to try to prevent his fall. like a slow-moving avalanche over a mountain toppling. The War Master collapsed. Emo Quill scratched at the data slate, wept as she read the words there. I was there the day that Horus fell. Dun 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 dun. What do y'all think so far? We're getting into what brought about the 40th millennia. The 40K itself. Just saying. What do y'all think so far? Is it cool and exciting and everything that you hoped for? Just gonna deal with some bots here pretty quick in my account. There we go. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was taken care of. And then that was taken care of. More bots. It's what I expected, to be honest. Maybe I just saw Warhammer 40K. I mean. Did I ban Zai on accident? Did I misclick here? No, okay, Zai's still here. Okay. I just saw Warhammer 40. Wow, it showed your first message again. But so or Sylph. Okay, Sylph. Sorry, I was reading it as like Sylph. Okay. Okay, Sylph. My bad. I was reading it as like Sylph. Sylph. Okay. But so essentially this is the part, because I've read all 54 books of the Horus Heresy. Yeah. I've read all 54 books of the Horus Heresy, and this is the part where you kind of like see where shit starts to fucking change. Like, you always hear about it. You watch those YouTube videos where it's like, Horus sent the Space Wolves to take on the 1,000 Suns, and da-da-da-da, but this is like going further in depth than those like 30-minute YouTube videos ever could. And it's actually really great. It's a really intricate story. The first 4 books is basically about where Horus made the decision to go after the Emperor, and then after that it's about these different like sections. Because a lot of people like to think that, oh, every single fucking, company in the Sons of the Emperor went fucking traitor. No, they didn't. There were some that were off on other things, heard about this happening, and they're like, this shit ain't right. I'm repainting my fucking armor because this shit ain't right. So, I read a few Warhammer 40K books, not anything from the Horus Heresy. Well, you're in luck, because I plan on reading all 54 of the books on stream over time. And I mean, started out reading them. It took, fucking spam calls never stop. I originally started this ambition back in like 2021 or 2020, 2021, down there. It was either within my first year of streaming, but there wasn't much traction for it, and I had like maybe 100 followers at the time, but I figured I enjoy reading, so I'm going to share reading. Finally, peace and quiet. Our kids napping now, Smug. But I honestly just came to the decision that regardless whether there's going to be people here to listen or not, I'm going to start reading them. Like, I enjoy it. I enjoyed the books. Henry Cavill admitted to playing Warhammer since he was 10, so people are like, oh my god, Warhammer. And the books honestly go more in depth than any you ever could. I'll probably listen to the VODs. That's okay too. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're always going to be there. I always publish them. They're there for like 30 days as an affiliate. They're going to be there a while, and maybe I'll start uploading them to you. But I don't know if the VODs play the auto run commercial or not. Starting working next week. I work 10-hour days. Oof. Reminds me of the oil field. I was working 12 to 16-hour days. 7 days a week. Actually, where I read the Horus Heresy. Was working those 12 to 16-hour days. I was a supervisor on the night shift. I didn't really have to stay busy. I just had to keep people awake and make sure shit didn't break down, which was great because day crew was a fucking nightmare because shit was breaking down constantly. You think they'd be more alert. But, I'm not sure if uploading the VODs to YouTube has the autoplay ads playing or not, but I just upload the whole VODs, whether it's 2 hours, 4, 6, 8, 12. Thing to YouTube. I don't give a shit. And since Amazon Kindle won't let me do this, I can't be like, yeah, check out the ebooks. Amazon Kindle's like, we're looking for a different voice for these books. Like, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to read them on stream then. So, I mean, you're here. Twitch is still getting money. No, not that bad. Taking a little break. We're 40% of the way through this book. Righty. Chapter 9. Silver Towers, a bloody return. The veil grows thin. From here he could see the pyramid roof of the Antheum. Low evening sun reflecting on its gold panels as if it were ablaze. And even though Magnus knew he used but a colorful metaphor, the very idea gave him a pang of loss. To imagine that vast repository of knowledge lost in flames was abhorrent. He turned his cyclopean gaze from the pyramid to the crystal, glass, and gold. Hold on a sec, guys. My dog's crying to go out. I will be right back. Mr. Man has to go duty. Alright, I'm back. I am back. Was I missed? Did y'all miss me? Ow. Alright, I'm back. Yep, thank you for the welcome back. Let's get back into this. Okay, from here you could see the pyramid roof of the Anthinomum. The low evening sun reflecting on its gold panels as if it were ablaze, and even though Magnus knew, he used but a colorful metaphor, the very idea gave him a pang of loss. To imagine the vast repository of knowledge lost in the flames was abhorrent, and he turned his cyclopean gaze from the pyramid to the crystals. Pyramid of crystal, glass, and gold. Ziak, the so-called City of Light, stretched out before him, its marble colonnades and wide boulevards, tree-lined and peaceful. Soaring towers of silver and gold reared above the city, a city of gilded libraries, arched museums, and sprawling seats of learning. The bulk of the city was constructed of white marble and gold-veined house light. Shining like a bejeweled crown in the sun, its architecture spoke of a time long past, buildings shaped by craftsmen. Shaped by craftsmen who had honed their trades for centuries under the tutelage of the Thousand Suns. From his balcony of the Pyramid of Photep, Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns, contemplated the future of Prospero. His head still hurt from the ferocity of the nightmare, and his eye throbbed painfully in its enlarged socket. He gripped the marble balustrade of the balcony, trying to wish away the visions that assailed him in the night, and now chased him into the daylight. Mysteries of the night were revealed in the light of day, but these visions of darkness could not be dragged out so easily. For as long as Magnus could remember, he had been cursed and blessed with a measure of foresight, and his allegorical interpretation of the Anthinomum ablaze troubled him more than he'd like to admit. He poured himself some wine from a silver pitcher, rubbing his copper-skinned hand through his mane of fiery red hair. The wine helped dull the ache in his heart as well as his head, but he knew it was only a temporary solution. Events were now in motion that he had the power to shape, and though much of what he had seen was madness and turmoil and made no sense, he could make out enough to know that he had to make a decision soon, before events spiraled out of control. Magnus turned from the view over Zika and made his way back inside the pyramid, pausing as he caught sight of his reflection, gleaming silver panels. Thank you for the 45 bits, Sylph. I appreciate it. So, Magnus, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns, tries to stop Horus from throwing his giant fucking temper tantrum. But then Horus is like, hey, this shit's going on because of the Thousand Suns, Space Wolves, I need you to go deal with them. And then Horus shows up and he's like, I'm gonna fuck up whoever wins. And then Ultramarines show up and are like, well shit, the Thousand Suns are fleeing, the Space Wolves are left, what the fuck are you doing, Horus? And yeah. So that's how it ends up playing out, but that's later in the series. But thank you for the 45 biddies. Huge in red skin, Magnus was a towering giant with a lustrous mane of red hair. His patrician features were noble and just, his single eye golden and flecked with crimson, where his other eye would have sat was blank and empty, though a thin scar ran from the bridge of his nose, the edge of his cheekbone. Cyclopean Magnus, they called him, or worse. Since their inception, the Thousand Suns had been viewed with suspicion for embracing powers that others were afraid of. Powers that, because they were not understood, were being rejected as somehow unclean. Rejected ever since the Council of Nicaea. Magnus threw down his goblet, angry at the memory of his humbling at the feet of the Emperor, when he had been forced to renounce the study of all things sorcerous for fear of what he might learn. Such a notion was surely ridiculous, for was his father's realm not founded on pursuit of knowledge and reason? What harm could study and learning do? Though he had retreated to Prospero and sworn to renounce such pursuits, the planet of sorcerers had one vital attribute that made it a perfect place for such studies. It was far from the prying of eyes of those who said he dabbled with powers beyond his control. Magnus smiled at the thought, wishing he could show his persecutors the things he had seen, the wonders and the beauty of what lived beyond the veil of reality. Notions of good and evil fell by the wayside next to such power as dwelled in the warp, for they were antiquated concepts of a religious society long cast aside. He stooped to retrieve his goblet and filled it once more before returning to his chamber and taking a seat at his desk. Inside it was cool, and scents of various inks and parchments made him smile. The wide chamber was walled with bookshelves and glass cabinets filled with the curios and remnants of lost knowledge, gleaned from conquered worlds. Magnus himself had penned many of the texts in this room, though others had contributed to this most personal of libraries. Hosis Takar, Araman, and the Uthazar, to name but a few. If you're getting sleepy, you should probably sleep, Jess. Knowledge had always been a refuge for Magnus. Intoxicating thrill of rendering the unknown down to its constituent parts, and by doing so, rendering it knowledgeable. Ignorance of the universe's workings had created false gods in man's ancient past, and the understanding of them was calculated to destroy them. Such was Magnus's lofty goal. His father denied such thing, kept his people ignorant of the true powers that existed in the galaxy. And though he promulgated a doctrine of science and reason, it was naught but a lie, a comforting blanket thrown over humanity to shield them from the truth. Magnus had looked deep into the warp, however, and knew different. I went to bed at 7 before. I went to bed last night at 10 and woke up at 4 and went to the gym. He closed his eye, seeing again the darkness of the corrupt chamber, the glittering sheen of the sword, and the blow that would change the fate of the galaxy. He saw death and betrayal, heroes and monsters. He saw loyalty tested and found wanting, standing firm in equal measure. Terrible fates awaited his brothers, and worst of all, he knew that his father was utterly ignorant of the doom that threatened the galaxy. Soft knocking came at his door, and the red-armored figure of Aram entered, holding before him a long staff topped with a single eye. "Have you decided yet, my lord?" asked his chief librarian without preamble. "I have, my friend," said Magnus. "Then I shall gather the coven." "Yes," sighed Magnus. "In the catacombs beneath the city, order the thralls to assemble the conjunction. I shall be with you presently." "As you wish, my lord," said Araman. "Something troubles you?" asked Magnus, detecting an edge of reticence in his friend's tone. No, my lord, it is not my place to say. Nonsense. If you have concern, then I give you leave to voice it. May I speak freely?" "Of course," nodded Magnus. "What troubles you?" Araman hesitated. "The spell you propose is dangerous, very dangerous. None of us truly understand its subtlety, and there may be consequences we do not yet foresee." Magnus laughed. "I've not known you to shirk from power of a spell before, Araman. When in manipulating power of this magnitude, there will always be unknowns, but only by wielding it can we bring it to heel. Never forget that we are the masters of the warp, my friend. It is strong, yes, and great power lives within it. We have the knowledge and means to bend it to our will, do we not?" "We do, my lord," Araman. "Why then do we use it to warn the Emperor of what is to come when he has forbidden us to use such matters?" Magnus rose from his feet, his copper skin darkening in anger. Because when my father sees that it is our sorcery that saved his realm, he will not be able to deny that what we do here is important, nay, vital to the Imperium's survival. Arma nodded, fearful of his Primarch's rage, and Magnus softened his tone. There is no other way, my friend. The Emperor's palace is warded against the power of the warp, and only a conjuration of such power will breach those wards. Biological clock thinks it's time to be extra tired. Well, spring is here too, you know. Then I will gather the coven immediately, said Armin. Yes, gather them, but await my arrival before beginning. Horus may yet surprise us. Panic, fear, indecision, 3 emotions previously unknown to Loken seized him as Horus fell. The War Master crashed to the ground in slow motion, splashing into the mud as his body went completely limp. Shouts of alarm went up, but the paralysis of inaction held those closest to the War Master tightly in its grip, as though time has slowed itself. Loken stared at the War Master lying on the ground before him, inert and corpse-like, unable to believe what he was seeing. The rest of the Mournful stood similarly immobile, rooted to the spot in disbelief. He felt as though the air had become thick and cloying, the cries of fear that spread outwards echoing and distant, as though the hollow picture were running too slow. Only Pertinella Vivar seemed unaffected by the inaction that held Loken and his brothers firm. Down on her knees in the mud next to the War Master, she was weeping and wailing at him to get back up. The knowledge that his commander was down and a mortal woman had reacted before any of the sons of Horus shamed Loken into action, and he dropped to one knee alongside the fallen Horus. Apothecary shouted Loken, and time snapped back with a crash of shout and cries. The Mournful dropped to the ground beside him. "What's wrong?" demanded Abaddon. "Commander," shouted Torgadon. Lupercal cried Axamon. Loken ignored them and forced himself to focus. This is a battlefield injury, and I will treat it as such, he thought. He scanned the War Master's body as the others put their hands on him, pushing the Remembrancer out of the way as each struggled to wake their Lord and Master. Too many hands were interfering, and Loken yelled, "Stop! Get back!" The War Master's armor was beaten and torn, but Loken could see no other obvious breaches in the armor plate save where the shoulder guard had been torn away, and where the gaping puncture wound oozed in his chest. "Help me get his armor off," he shouted. What's making you more tired? Is it that time of the month type thing again? The Mournful bound together as brothers, nodded, and grateful to have focus for their efforts, instantly obeyed Loken's command. Within moments they removed Horus's breastplates and pauldrons, and were unstrapping his remaining shoulder guard. Loken tore off his helmet and cast it aside, pressing his ear to the War Master's chest. He could hear the War Master's heart pounding at a deathly slow double beat. "He's still alive," he cried. "Get out of the way," shouted a voice behind him. He turned to rebuke this newcomer before seeing the double helix, a Cadius symbol on his armor plates. Another apothecary joined the first, and the Mournful was unceremoniously pushed aside as they went to work. Hissing, Nartha comes stabbing into the War Master's flesh. Loken stood watching them, impotent and helpless as they fought to stabilize the War Master. His eyes filled with tears, and he looked around in vain for something to do. Something to make him feel he was helping. There was nothing. He felt like crying out to the heavens for making him so powerful and yet so useless. Abaddon wept openly, and to see the first captain so unmanned made Loken's fear for the War Master all the more terrible. Axamon watched the apothecary's work with grim stoicism, and while Chorgadon chewed his bottom lip and prevented the Remembrancer from getting in the way. The War Master's skin was ashen, his lips blue and his limbs rigid, and Loken knew they must destroy whatever power felled Horus. He turned and began marching back towards the Gloria Terra, determined that he would take that stricken craft apart piece by piece if need be. Captain called one of the apothecaries, a warrior Loken knew as Vadon. "Get a Stormbird here now. We have to get him to the Vengeful Spirit." Loken stood immobile, torn between desire for vengeance and his duty to the War Master. "Now, Captain," yelled the apothecary, and the spell was broken. He nodded dumbly and opened a channel to the captains of the Stormbirds, grateful to have a purpose in this maelstrom of confusion. Within moments, one of the medical craft was inbound, and Loken watched mesmerized as the apothecaries fought to save the War Master. The pesky thing doesn't stay away, even though I put not welcome stickers everywhere. If stickers could actually stop things from happening, probably would be everywhere. You could see the frantic menstruations. They were fighting an uphill battle, their Nethicarium wearing miniature centrifuges of blood and dispensing patches of sin skin to treat. Their conversations passed over him, but he caught the odd familiar word here and there. Armin cells ineffective. Hypoxic. Aximon appeared at the side and placed a hand. Shoulder. Don't say it, little Horus warned. I wasn't going to, Garviel, said Aximon. All right. Nothing this place could throw or master that'll keep him down for long. How do you know? Asked Loken, his voice close. I have faith. Faith? Yes, answered Aximon. Faith that the War Master is strong and too stubborn to be brought low by something like that. Before you know it, we'll be his war dogs once again. Loken nodded as the howling downdraft of the Stormbird snatched his breath away. Screaming craft hovered overhead, throwing up sheets of water as it circled on its descent. Landing skids deployed and the scraft came down amid a spray of muddy water. Before it touched down, the Mournful and Apothecaries had lifted Horus between, and as the assault ramped down, they were rushing inside, placing the War Master on one of the gurneys as Stormbird's jets fired to lift it from Davin's moon. Assault ram clanged shut behind them. Felt the aircraft lurch as the pilots aimed it for the skies. Apothecaries whipped the War Master up to a medicame, jamming needles, placing a few line of oxygen. Suddenly, superfluous, Loken slumped into one of the armored bucket seats against the fuselage of one of the aircraft and held his head in his hands. Across from him, the Mournful did the same. To say that Ignis Carcassi was not a happy man was an understatement. His lunch was cold, Mercedes Oleaten was late, and the wine he was drinking wasn't fit to lubricate the gears of an engine. To top it all off, he tapped his pen on the thick paper of the Bondsman No. 7 without any inspiration flowing. He'd taken to avoiding the retreat, partly for fear of running into Wenduin again, but mostly because it just depressed him too much. The vandalism done to the bar lent it an incredibly sad and gloomy aspect, and while some of the remembrancers needed the squalor to inspire their work, Carcassi wasn't one of them. Instead, he relaxed in the subdeck, where most of the remembrancers gathered for their meals, but which was empty for a better part of the day. The solitude was helping him to deal with all that happened since he challenged Euphrates Keeler about her distributing the Lycidio Deviantis pamphlets, though it certainly wasn't helping him compose any poetry. He'd been unrepentant when he confronted her, urging him to join her in prayer to the God Emperor before some kind of makeshift shrine. I can't, he said. It's ridiculous, Euphrates. Can't you see that? What's so ridiculous about it, Ig? She asked. Think about it. We've embarked upon the greatest crusade known to man, a crusade, a war motivated by religious beliefs. No, he protested. It's not that at all. We've moved beyond the need for the crutch of religion, Euphrates. And we didn't set out from Terra to take a step backwards into such outmoded concepts of belief. It's only by dispelling the clouds of superstitions of religion that we discover truth, reason, and morality. It's not superstition to believe in a god, Ignis, said Euphrates, holding out another Lycidio Deviantis pamphlet. Look, read this and then make up your mind. I don't need to read it, he snapped, throwing the pamphlet to the deck. I know what it will say and I'm not interested. You have no idea. But you have no idea, Ignis. It's all so clear to me now. Ever since that thing attacked me, I've been hiding, in my billet and in my head. But I realize now that all I had to do was to allow the light of the Emperor into my heart and I would be healed. Didn't Mercedes and I have anything to do with that? sneered Carcassi. "All those hours we spent with you weeping on our shoulders?" "Of course you did," smiled Euphrates, coming forward and placing her hands on his cheeks. "Why, I wanted to give you the message and tell you what I'd realized. Very simple, Ignis. We create our own gods, and the blessed emperor, mankind, is the master of mankind." "Create our own gods," said Carcassi, pulling away from her. "No, my dear. Ignorance and fear create the gods. Enthusiasm and deceit adorn them, and human weakness worships them. It's been the same throughout history. When men destroy their old gods, they find new ones to take their place. What makes you think this is any different?" "Because I feel the Emperor's light within me." "Oh, well, I can't argue with that, can I?" "Spare me your sarcasm, Ignis," said Euphrates suddenly hostile. "I thought you might be open to hearing the good word, but I can see you're just a close-minded fool. Get out, Ignis. I don't want to see you again." Thus dismissed, he found himself outside the companionway alone, bereft of a friend he'd only just managed to make. That had been the last time she'd spoken to him. He'd seen her only once since then, and she ignored his greeting. "Lost in thought, Ignis?" asked Mercedes Oleton, and he looked up in surprise, shaken from his miserable reverie by her sudden appearance. "Sorry, my dear," he said. "I didn't hear you approach. I was miles away, composing another verse for Captain Loken to misunderstand and Cinderman to discard." He smiled, instantly lifting his spirits. It was impossible to be too Malden around Mercedes. She had a way of making a man realize that it was good to be alive. "Solitude suits you, Ignis. You're far less susceptible to temptation." "Oh, I don't know," he said, holding up a bottle of wine. "There's always room in my life for temptation. I count it a bad day if I'm not tempted by something or another." "You're incorrigible, Ignis," he laughed. "But enough of that. What's so important that you drag me away from my transcripts to meet? I want to be up to date by the time the spear tip gets back from the moon." Flustered by her directness, Carcassi wasn't sure where to begin and thus opted for the softly approach. "Have you seen Euphrates around recently?" "I saw her yesterday evening just before the Stormbirds launched. Why?" "Did she seem herself?" "Yes, I think so. I was a little surprised by the change in her appearance, but she's an imagist. I suppose it's what they do every now and again." "Did she try to give you anything?" "Give me anything? No. Look, what's this all about?" Carcassi slipped a battered pamphlet across the table towards Mercedes, watching her expression change as she read it and recognized it for what it was. "Where did you get this?" she asked when she finished reading it. "Euphrates gave it to me," he said. "Apparently she wants to spread the word of the God Emperor to us first, because we helped her when she needed support." "God Emperor? Has she taken her leave of senses?" "I don't know, maybe," he said, pouring himself another drink. Mercedes pushed over a glass and he filled that too. "I don't think she was over her experience in the Whisperheads, even if she made out that she was." "This is insane," said Mercedes. "She'll have her certification revoked. Did you tell her that?" "Sort of," said Carcassi. "I tried to reason with her, but you know how it goes with those religious types. Never any room for a dissenting opinion. And nothing. She threw me out of her billet after that." "So you handled it with your usual tact then?" "Perhaps I could have been more delicate," agreed Carcassi. "But I was shaken to know that a woman of intelligence could be taken in by such nonsense. What do we do about it?" "You tell me. I don't have a clue. You think we should tell someone about Euphrates?" Mercedes took a long drink of the wine and said, "I think we have to." "Any ideas who?" "Cinderman, maybe?" Carcassi sighed. "I had a feeling you were going to suggest him. I don't like the man, but he's probably the best bet these days. If anyone can talk to Euphrates round, it's an iterator." Mercedes sighed and poured another couple of drinks. "Want to get drunk? Now you're talking my language," said Carcassi. They swapped stories and memories of less complicated times for an hour, finishing the bottle of wine and sending a servitor to fetch more when it ran out. By the time they'd drained half the second one, they were already planning a great symphonic work of her documentarist findings embellished with his verse. They laughed and studiously avoided any talk of Euphrates Keeler and the betrayal they were soon to visit upon her. Their thoughts were immediately dispelled as chiming alarm bells rang out and the corridor beyond began to fill with hurrying people. At first they ignored the noise, but as the number of people grew, they decided to find out what was going on. Picking up the bottle and glasses, Carcassi and Mercedes unsteadily made their way to the hatchway where they saw the scene of utter bedlam. Soldiers and civilians, remembrancers and ship crew were heading for the embarkation decks in a hurry. They saw faces streaked with tears and huddled weeping figures consoling one another in shared misery. "What's going on?" shouted Carcassi, grabbing a passing soldier. The man rounded on him angrily. "Get off me, you old fool!" "I just want to know what's happening," said Carcassi, shocked at the man's venom. "Haven't you heard?" wept the soldier. "It's all over the ship." "What is?" demanded Mercedes. "The War Master." "What about him? Is he all right?" The man shook his head. "Emperor save us, but the War Master is dead." The bottle slipped from Carcassi's hand, shattering on the floor, and he was instantly sober. Dead? The War Master dead? Surely there had to be some kind of mistake. Surely Horus was beyond such concerns as mortality. He faced Mercedes and could see exactly the same thoughts running through her head. The soldier he'd stopped shrugged off his grip and ran down the corridor, leaving the two of them standing there, aghast at such a horrific prospect. "It can't be true," whispered Mercedes. "It just can't be. I know there must be some mistake. What if there isn't?" "I don't know," said Carcassi. There went quiet. There went Mount Quiet. Oh no. Tell the oldest it's story time and to listen. "It can't be true," whispered Mercedes. "It just can't be. I know, there must be some mistake. What if there isn't?" "I don't know," said Carcassi, "but we have to find out more." Mercedes nodded and waited for him to collect the bondsmen before they joined the hurrying throng as it made its mob-like way towards the embarkation decks. Neither of them spoke during the journey, too busy trying to process the impact of the War Master's death. Carcassi felt the muse stir within him at such a weighty subject matter and tried not to despise the fact that it came at such a terrible time. He spotted the corridor leading to the observation deck adjacent to the launch port from where the Stormbirds could be seen deploying or returning. He resisted his pull until he explained his plan. "There's no way they're going to let us in," said Carcassi, out of breath from his exertion. "We can watch the Stormbird arrive from here, and there's an observation gantry that overlooks the deck itself." They darted from the human river, making its way to the embarkation deck, and followed the arched corridor that led to the observation deck. Inside the long chamber, the wide armored glass walls showed smudges of starlight and glinting hulls of distant bulk cruisers belonging to the army and the Mechanicum. Below them was the chasm-like opening of the embarkation deck, its blinking locator lights flashing an angry red. Mercedes dimmed the lighting and the details beyond the glass became clearer. The yellow-brown swell of Davins moved, curved away from them, its surface grimy and smeared with clouds. A hazy corona of sickly light haloed the moon. "Here. Peaceful. I don't see anything," said Mercedes. "This is jumping on the pass early. And for trampoline." "Yeah, they do. They live on a lot of land. Let her go chase the chickens." Carcassi pressed himself against the glass to eliminate reflections and tried to see something other than himself and he saw it, like a glimmering firefly. A distant speck of fire was rising out of the moon's corona and heading toward the vengeful spirit. "There," he said, pointing. "Where? Wait, I see it," said Mercedes, clicking the image of the raft. Carcassi watched as the light drew near, dissolving itself into the shape of a... As it angled its approach to the embarkation deck, even though Carcassi was the pilot, he could tell that its approach was recklessly rapid. Craft's wings folding at the last moment as it aimed at the yawning red-lit hatch. "Come on," he said, taking Mercedes' hand, leading the way up the steps to the observation gantry. The steps were steep and narrow, and Carcassi had to stop to get his breath back before he reached the top. By the time they reached the gantry, the Stormbird had already been recovered and its assault ramp was descending. A host of Astartes gathered around the craft as the bell of return began ringing and 4 warriors emerged. The plates of their armor dented and bloodstained. Between them, they carried a body draped in a legion banner. Carcasey's breath caught in his throat and he felt his heart turn to sight. The Mournful, said Mercedes. Oh no. 4 warriors were quickly followed by an enormous gurney upon which lay a partially armored warrior of magnificent stature. Even from here, Carcasey could tell that the figure upon the gurney was the War Master. And though tears leapt unbidden to his eyes at the sight of such a superlative warrior laid low, he rejoiced that the shrouded corpse was not the War Master. He heard Mercedes blink clicking images, even though he knew there would be no point. Her eyes were similarly misty. Behind the gurney came the Remembrancer woman bar, her dress torn and bloody, the fine fabric mud-stained and ragged, but Carcasey pushed her from his mind as he saw more warriors rush towards the gurney. Armored in white plate, they surrounded the War Masters, filled through the embarkation deck with great haste, and Carcasey's heart leapt as he recognized the apothecary. He's still alive, he said. What? How do you know? The apothecaries are still working on it, laughed Carcasey. The relief tasting like sweetest wine. Relief tasting like the sweetest wine. They threw themselves into each other's arms, embracing with the sheer relief of the War Master's survival. He's alive, sobbed Mercedes. I knew he had to be. Couldn't be dead. No, agreed Carcasey. Couldn't. A goat chased after her. Well, I mean, you know, I would laugh too. Not gonna lie to you. I absolutely would have laughed. I totally would have absolutely laughed and lost my mind as well, seeing that. So, you know. They broke apart and sagged against the railings. The Astartes escorted the fallen War Master across the deck. As the huge blast doors rumbled open, the masses of people gathered outside surged through in a great wave. Their cries of loss and pain audible, even through the armored glass of the observation gantry. No, whispered Carcasey. No. The Astartes were in no mood to be slowed by this mass of people, brutally clubbed them aside as they forced a path through the crowd. The Mournful led the gurney through the crowds, mercilessly clearing a bloody path through the people before them. Carcasey saw men and women cast down, trampled underfoot, and their screams were painful. Sadie held his arm as they watched the Astartes bludgeon their way from the embarkation deck. They vanished through the blast door, lost to sight as they rushed toward the medical deck. Poor people, cried Mercedes, sinking to her knees, down on the scene like the aftermath of a battle. Wounded soldiers, remembrance, civilian lay where they had fallen, beaten and broken simply because they were unlucky enough to be in the path of the Astartes. Didn't care. Able to bloody scene witness. They've killed those people like they didn't care. Still in shock at the casualty. Proud Kirk flipped the railings. Knuckles clenched outrage. How dare they? How dare they? Sang anger at the scenes below still seethed close to the surface. However, he noticed a robed figure making her way through the carnage below, reaching out to the end, stunned. His eyes narrowed, but he recognized the shapely form of Euphrates Keeler. He was handing out the Licentio Diviantis pamphlets. He wasn't alone. Malgahurst watched the recording from the embarkation deck with a grim expression, watching his fellow sons of Horus batter their way through the crowds that swarmed around the War Master's racked body. Pics replayed again and again on the set into the table in the War Master's sanctum. Each time he watched it, he willed it to be different. Each time the flickering images remained How many dead? Hector Vivaris standing at Malgahurst's shoulder. I don't have the final figures yet, but at least 21 are dead and many more badly injured or won't awake from the comas they're in. He cursed Loken and the others for their heavy-handedness. The image played again. Suppose he couldn't blame them for their ardor. War Master was in critical condition, and no one knew if he would live, so the desperation to reach the medical decks was forgivable, even if many might say their actions were not. Bad business, Malgahurs, said Vivarus needlessly. The Astartes will not come out of this well. Malgahurs sighed and said they thought the War Master was dying and acted accordingly. Acted accordingly? Repeated Vivarus. I don't think many people will accept that, my friend. Once word of this gets out, it will be a crippling blow to morale. Not get out, Malgahurs. I'm rounding up everyone who was on that deck. Have shut down all non-command box traffic from the ship. Tall and precise, Hector Vivarus was rake thin and angular. His every movement was calculated. He carried into his roles as Lord Commander of the Army Forces of the 63rd Expedition. Trust me, Malgahurs, we'll get out. One way or another, it will get out. Nothing remains secret forever. Such things have a habit of wanting to be, and this will be no different. And what do you suggest, Lord Commander? Asked Malgahurs. Are you genuinely asking me, Mal, or are you just observing a courtesy because I'm here? I'm genuinely asking, said Malgahurs, smiling as he realized that he meant it. Vivarus was a canny soldier who understood the hearts and minds of mortal men. And you have to tell the people what happened. Be honest. Heads will roll, cautioned Malgahurs. We will demand blood for this. Then give it to them. If that's what it takes, give it to them. Someone has to be seen to pay for this atrocity. Atrocity? Is that what you're calling it now? What else will you call it? Astartes warriors have committed murder. The enormity of what Vivarus was suggesting staggered Malgahurs. He lowered himself slowly into one of the chairs at the War Master's table. You would have me give up a Astartes warrior for this? I cannot do it. Vivarus leaned. Decorations, medals of his dress uniform reflecting like gold suns and black surf. Innocent blood has been spilled, and while I can understand the reasons behind the actions of your men, it changes nothing. I can't do it, Hector, Malgahurs shaking his head. Varus moved to stand next to him. You and I both swore the oath of loyalty to the Imperium, did we not? Did. What has that to do with anything? The old general locked eyes with Malgahurs and said, we swore that we would uphold the ideals of nobility and justice that the Imperium stands for, yes? Yes, but this is different. There were extenuating circumstances. Irrelevant, snapped Vivarus. The Imperium must stand for something or it stands for nothing. If you turn away from this, then you betray that oath of loyalty. Are you willing to do that, Malgahurs? Before he could answer, there was a soft knocking on the glass of the sanctum, and Malgahurs turned to see who served them. Ingme Singh, mistress of the astropathy, stood before them like a skeletal ghost, a hooded white robe. The upper portions of her face shrouded in shadows. Mistress Singh, said Vivarus, bowing deep to the path. Lord Vivarus, she replied, voice soft and feather light. She turned to the Lord Commander's bow. Despite her blindness, inclined her head precisely in the right direction. Talent that never failed to win. What is it, Mistress Singh? He asked, though in truth, glad of the interruption. I bring tidings that must inspire Malgahurs, turning her blind gaze upon. The astropathic choirs are powerful. That mean? He asked. The veil between. They sing. Oh boy. I don't think we're gonna finish this book today, guys. That's just honest. Take net wet. I don't think it's gonna happen today, guys. Whereas I started out with a gallant goal and everything in mind, I have ran out of steam. Blech. So, you know. I think we can get through like 1 or 2 more chapters. Then I think we're gonna have to reluctantly tap out, unless if things get just a bit better. Chapter 10. Apothecarian Prayers Confession. I gotta stretch. Thank you. Oh. Chapter 10. Apothecarian Prayers Confession. Ripping out of his armor and wearing bloody surgical robes, Vadon was as close to desperate as he had ever been in his long experience as an apothecary of the Sons of Horus. The War Master lay before him on the gurney, his flesh exposed to his knives and to the probes of the Medicae machines. Oxygen was fed to the War Master through a mask, and saline drips pumped fluids into his body in an attempt to normalize his blood pressure. Medicae servitors brought fresh blood for immediate transfusions, and the entire theater fizzed with the tension and frantic activity. Losing him, shouted at Apothecary Logan. Watching the heart monitors, blood pressure is dropping rapidly, heart rate spiking, he's going to arrest. Damn it, cursed Vadon. Get me more Larum serum, his blood won't clot, and fix up another fluid line. A whirring surgical nethicarium swung down from the ceiling, multiple limbs clattering as they obeyed Vadon's shouted commands. Fresh Laramin cells were pumped directly into Horus's shoulder, and the bleeding slowed, though Vadon could see it still wasn't stopping completely. Thick needles stabbed into the War Master's arms, filling him with super-oxygenated blood, but their supply was dwindling faster than he would believe possible. Stabilizing, breathed Logan. Heart rate slowing and blood pressure is up. Good, said Vadon. We got some breathing room then. Can't take much more of this, said Logan. We're running out of things we can do for him. I'll not hear that in my theater, Logan snapped Vadon. We're not going to lose him. War Master's chest hiked as he clung to life, his breathing coming in short, hyperventilated gasps, more blood pumping from the wound in his shoulder. Of the 2 wounds the War Master had suffered, it seemed the least severe, but Vadon knew it was the one that was killing him. The puncture wound in his chest had practically healed already. Ultrasonograms showing his lung had sealed itself off from the pulmonary system while it repaired itself. The War Master's secondary lungs were sustaining him for now. The Mournval hovered like expectant fathers as the apothecaries worked harder than they had ever worked before. Vadon had never expected to have the War Master for a patient. The Primarch's biology was as far beyond that of a normal Astartes warrior as his own was from a mortal man. And Vadon knew that he was out of his depth. Only the Emperor himself had the knowledge to delve into the body of a Primarch with confidence, and the enormity of what was occurring was not lost to him. A green light winked to life of the Nethicarium machine as he lifted the data slate from the port and the silver steel surface. Numbers and text scrolled across the glossy surface as though much of it made no sense to him. He felt his spirits fall as what he could comprehend sank in. Seeing the War Master was stable, he circled the operating slab and joined the Mournval, wishing he had better news for them. "What's wrong with him?" demanded Abaddon. "Why is he still lying there?" "Honestly, First Captain, I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" shouted Abaddon, grabbing Vadon and slamming him against the theater wall. Silver trays laden with scalpels, saws, and forceps clattered to the tiled floor. "Why don't you know?" Loken and Axamon grappled with the captains. Vadon felt Abaddon's enormous slowly crushing his. "Let go of him, Ezekiel," cried Logan. "This is helping." "We won't let him die," snarled Abaddon. Vadon was amazed to see terrible fear in the captain's eyes. "He is the War Master." "I don't know that," gasped Vadon. The other prized Abaddon's grip from his. Slid down the wall, already "For damn you if you let him die," hissed Abaddon, stalking the theater with predatory eyes. "He dies, I will kill you." Axamon led the first captain away. In words as low. "Man's a manic. Get him out of my theater now." Not himself, the apothecary. None of us. Keep him away from my team captain, Don. Not in control of himself, and that makes him dangerous. We will, Torgadon promised him. Now what can he tell us? Will he survive? Vaughn took a moment to compose himself before answering, picking up his fallen data slate. As I said before, I just don't know. We're like children trying to repair a logic engine that's been dropped from orbit. We don't understand even a fraction of what his body is capable of or how it works. I can't even begin to guess what kind of damage it suffered to have caused this. What's actually happening to him? Asked Loken. It's the wound in his shoulder. It won't clot. It's bleeding out and we can't stop it. We found some degraded genetic residue in the wound that might be some kind of poison, but I can't be sure. Might it be bacteriological or a viral infection? Asked Torgadon. The water on Davin's moon was thick with contaminants. I don't know, I swallowed a flagon's worth of it. No, said Vadon. The War Master's body is, for all intents and purposes, immune to such things. Then what is it? This is a guess, but it looks like this particular poison induces a form of anemic hypoxia. Once it enters the bloodstream, it's absorbed exponentially by the red blood cells. In preference to oxygen, with the War Master's accelerated metabolism, the toxin was carried efficiently around his system, damaging his tissue cells as it went, so they were unable to make proper use of the reduced oxygen content. So where did it come from? Asked Loken. I thought you said the War Master was immune to such things. And so he is, but this is like nothing I've ever seen before. It's as though it's been specifically designed to kill him. It's got precisely the right genetic camouflage to fool his enhanced biological defenses and allow it to do the maximum amount of damage. It's a Primarch killer. Pure and simple. How do we stop it? This isn't an enemy you can take a bolt, Captain Loki. Poison. If I knew the source of the poison, we might be able to do it. And if we found the weapon that did this, would that be of some help? Asked Loken. In the desperate need for hope in the captain's eyes, Vadon nodded. Maybe. From the wound shape, it looks like a stab wound. You can retrieve the blade, then maybe we can. I'll find his sword. Turned to Vadon. He turned from Vadon and made his way to the... Going back there? Asked Torgadon, running to catch up with them. Yes? Don't try to stop me, warned Loken. Stop you, said Torgadon. Don't be a drama, Queen Garvey. I'm coming with you. Recovering a Titan after action in the field was a long and arduous process, full of technical, logistical, and manual difficulties. Entire fleets of vessels came down from orbit, bringing huge lifters, enormous diggers, and loading machines. The delivery vessels had to be dug from their impact craters, and an army of mechanicum servitors were required to facilitate the process. Titus Cassar was exhausted. He spent the better part of the day prepping the Titan for its recovery. And everything was in readiness for the return to the fleet. Until they recovered, there wasn't much to do, except wait. That had become the hardest part of all for the man left behind on Davin's moon. With time to wait, there was time to think. And with time to think, the human mind could conjure all manner of things from the depths of its imagination. Titus still couldn't believe that Horus had fallen. A being of such power, like unto a Titan himself, was not meant to fall in battle. He was invincible, the son of a god. In the shadow of the D's array, Titus fished out his Licitio Deviantis chapbook, and, once he was satisfied he was alone, began to read the words there. The badly printed scripture gave him comfort, turning his mind to the glory of the divine Emperor of mankind. O Emperor, who is Lord and God above us all, hear me in this hour of need. Your servant lies with death's cold touch upon him, and I ask you to turn your beneficent gaze his way. He fished out a pendant from beneath his uniform jacket as he read. It was a delicately wrought thing of silver and gold. He'd done one of the blank-faced servitors fashioned for him. A silver capital I with a golden starburst at its center. It represented hope and the promise of a better future. He held it clasped to his breast as he recited more of the words of the Licitio Deviantis, feeling a familiar warmth suffuse him as he repeated the words. Titus sensed the presence of other people behind him, and stood a second too late, and turned to see Jonah Arukin and a group of the Titan's crew. Like him, they were dirty, and tired after the fight against the monsters of this place, but unlike him, they did not have faith. Guiltily, he closed his chapbook and waited for Jonah's inevitable barb. No one said anything, and as he looked closer, he saw a brittle edge of sorrow and the need for comfort in the faces of the men before him. "Titus," said Jonah Arkin, that is, the War Master, we wondered if... Titus smiled in welcome and understood what they come for. He opened his chapbook again and said, "Let us pray, my brothers." The medical deck was a sterile wilderness of tiled walls and brushed steel cabinets, a warren of soulless glass rooms and laboratories. Bertinella completely lost all sense of direction, bewildered by the hasty summons that had brought her from the moon's surface back, the vengeful spirit. Passing through the bloody embarkation deck, she saw that the upper levels of the ship were in pandemonium as word of the War Master's death had spread from vessel to vessel with all the fearsome rapidity of an epidemic. Malgahurst the Twisted had issued a fleet-wide communique denying the War Master was dead, but hysteria and paranoia had a firm head start on his words. Riots had taken hold aboard several ships as doomsayers and demagogues had arisen proclaiming that these were now the end time. Army units had been ruthlessly quashing such malcontents, but more sprang up faster than they could stop them. Been scant hours since the War Master's fall, but the 63rd Expedition was already beginning to tear itself apart without him. Maggard followed Pertinella, his wounds bound and sealed with sin skin by a Legion apothecary on the journey back to the War Master's flagship. His skin still had an unhealthy pallor and his armor was dented and torn, but he was alive and magnificent. Maggard was only an indentured servant, but he had impressed her, and she resolved to treat him with the respect his talents deserved. The helmeted Astartes warrior led her through the confusing maze of the Medicaid deck, eventually indicating that she should enter a nondescript white door marked with the winged staff wrapped in a pair of twisting serpents. Maggard opened the door for her, and she entered the gleaming operating theater, its circular walls covered to waist height in green enameled tiles. Silver cabinets, hissing, pumping machines surrounded the War Master, who lay on the operating slab, with a tangled web of tubes and wires attached to its flesh. A stool of gleaming metal set next to the slab. Medicaid servitors lurked around the circumference of the room, set into niches around the wall, and gurgling machines suspended above the War Master fed fluid and blood into his body. Her eyes misted to see the War Master brought so low, and tears came at this violation of the natural order of things. A giant Astartes warrior in a hooded surgical robes approached her and said, "My name is Apothecary Vadon, Miss Favar." He brushed her hands across her eyes, conscious of how she must look, her dress torn and caked with mud, her eyes blackened with smudged makeup. She started to hold out her hand for a kiss, but realized how foolish that would be and simply nodded. "I am Pertinella Vavar," she managed. "I am the War Master's documentarist." "I know," said Vadon. "He asked for you by name." Sudden hope flared in her breast. "He's awake?" Vadon nodded. "He is. If it were up to me, he would not be here. But I do not disobey the word of the commander, and he desires to speak with you." "How is she? How is he?" she asked. The apothecary shook his head. "He fades in and out of lucidity, so do not expect too much from him. If I decide it's time for you to leave, then you leave. Do you understand me?" "I do," she said, "but please, may I speak with him now?" Vadon seemed reluctant to let her near the War Master, but moved aside and let her pass. He nodded her thanks and took a faltering step towards the operating slab, eager to see the War Master, but afraid of what she might find. Pertinella's hand leapt to her mouth to stifle an involuntary gasp at the sight of him. The War Master's cheeks were sunken and low and hollow, his eyes dull and listless. Gray flesh hung from his skull, wrinkled and ancient-looking. His lips were the blue of a corpse. "Do I look that bad?" asked Horus, his voice rasping and distant. "No," she stammered. "Not at all. Don't lie to me, Miss Vavar. If you hear my valediction, then there must be no deceit between us. Valediction? No. I won't. You have to live. Believe me, there's nothing I'd like more, he wheezed. But Vadon tells me there's not much of chance of that. And I don't intend to leave this life without a proper legacy. Record that says the things that must be said before the end. Sir, your deeds alone stand as an eternal legacy. Please don't ask this of me. Horus coughed, a froth of blood onto his chest, and gathering his strength before speaking once more. His voice was strong and powerful when she remembered. You told me that it was your vocation to immortalize me, to record the glory of Horus for future generations, did you not? I did, she sobbed. Then do this last thing for me, Miss Vavar, he said. She swallowed hard and then fished out the data slate and the Nemo quill from her reticule before sitting on the high stool next to the operating slab. Very well, said at last. Let's start at the beginning. It was too much, began Horus. I promised my father I would make no mistakes, and now we have come to this. Mistakes? Asked Pertinella, though she suspected she knew the War Master's meaning. Tamba, giving him lordship over Davin, said Horus. Welcome back. He begged me not to leave him behind, claimed it was too much for him. I should have listened, but I was too eager to be away from such fresh conquest. Temba's weakness is not your fault, sir, she said. Good of you to say that, Miss Vavar, but I appointed him, said Horus. The responsibility lies with me. Thrall, Golomin will laugh when he hears of this. Him and the Lion both. They will say that I was not fit to be War Master since I could not read the hearts of men. Never, said Pertinella. They wouldn't dare. Oh, they will, girl, believe me. We are brothers. Yes, but like all brothers, we squabble and seek to outdo one another. Pertinella could not think of... Pertinella could not think of nothing to say. The idea of the superhuman Primarchs squabbling quite beyond her. They were jealous, all of them, continued Horus. When the Emperor named me War Master, it was all some of them could do to congratulate me. Argon especially, he was a wild one. And even now I can barely keep him in check. Gulliman wasn't much better. I could tell that he thought it should have been him. They were jealous of you? Asked Pertinella, unable to believe what the War Master was telling her, the Nemo quill scratching across the data slate in response to her thoughts. Oh yes, he nodded. Oh yes, nodded Horus bitterly. Only a few of my brothers were gracious enough to bow their heads and mean it. Logar, Mortarion, Sanguinius, Fulgrim, and Dorn. They are true brothers. I remember watching the Emperor's Stormbird leaving Olenor and weeping to see him go. But most of all, I remember the knives I felt in my back as he went. I could hear their thoughts as clearly as they spoke them aloud. Why should I, Horus, be named War Master, when there were others more worthy of their honor? You were made War Master because you are the most worthy, Sir Pertinella. No, said Horus. I was not. I was simply the one who embodied the Emperor's need at the time. You see, for the first 3 decades of the Great Crusade, I fought alongside the Emperor, and I alone felt the full weight of his ambition to rule the galaxy. He passed that vision to me, and I carried it with me in my heart as we forged our path across the stars. It was a grand adventure we were on. System after system, reunited with the Master of Mankind. You cannot imagine what it was like to live in such times, Miss. Sounds magnificent. It was, said Horus. It was, but it couldn't last. Soon we were being drawn to other worlds where we discovered my brother Primarchs. We had been scattered throughout the galaxy not long after our birth, and one by one the Emperor recovered us all. It must have been strange to be reunited with your brothers you had never known. Not as strange as you might think. As soon as I met each one, I had an immediate kinship with him. A bond that not even time or distance had broken. Won't deny that some were harder to like than others. If you ever meet Night Haunter, you'll understand what I mean. Moody bastard. But handy in a tight spot when you need some alien empire shitting in his britches before you attack. Argon's not much better. He's got a temper on him like you've never seen. You think you know anger. I tell you now that you don't know anything until you've seen Argon lose his temper. And don't get me started on the lion. Of the Dark Angels, his is the first legion, is it not? It is, replied Horus. And doesn't he just love to remind everyone of that? I could see in his eyes that he thought he should be master because his legion was the... Did you know he'd grown up living like an animal in the wilds? A little better than a feral savage? I ask you, is that the sort of man you want as your war master? No, it's not, said Horus, answering his question. And who would you have picked to be war master if not you? Asked Pertinella. Horus appeared to be momentarily perturbed by her question, but said, Sanguinius. Could have been him. He has the vision and strength to carry us to victory, the wisdom to rule once that victory is won. For all his aloof coolness, he alone has the Emperor's soul in his blood. Each of us carries part of our father within us. His hunger for battle, his psychic talent, or his determination to succeed. Sanguinius holds it all. Should have been his. What part of the Emperor do you carry, sir? Me? I carry his ambition to rule. While the conquest of the galaxy lay before us, that was enough. But now we are nearing the end. There is a Cretan proverb that says that peace is always over there. That is no longer true. It is within our grasp. The job almost done, and what is left for a man of ambition when the work is over? You are the Emperor's right hand, sir, protested Pertinella. His favored son. No more, said Horus sadly. Petty functionaries and administrators have supplanted me. The War Council is no more, and I receive my orders from the Council of Terra now. Once everything in the Imperium was geared for war and conquest, but now we are burdened with sectors, scribes, and scriveners who demand to know the cost of everything. The Imperium is changing, and I'm not sure I know how to change with it. In what way is the Imperium changing? Bureaucracy and officialdom are taking over, Miss Favar. Red tape, administrators, and clerks are replacing the heroes of the age. Unless we change our ways soon, in our direction, greatness as an empire will... Footnote. Everything I have achieved, distant, lost in the time like ancient era, remembered kindly their noble past. But surely the crusade was but the first step towards creating a new mankind to rule the galaxy. Such a galaxy will need administrators, laws, and scribes. What of the warriors who conquered it? What becomes of us? We to become Galileans. We were bred for war, and we were bred to kill. That is what we were created. We have become so much more than that. I am more. Progress is hard, my lord. Always adapt to changing times. Pertinella, uneasy at this change. It is not strange to mistake change for progress, said. I was bred with wondrous powers and flesh, but I did not dream myself into the man I am. I hammered and on the anvil of battle and conquest. All that I have achieved in the last 2 years. We're not here to shed their blood with us in the dark places of the galaxy. Where is the justice in that? Lesser men will rule over what I have conquered, but what will be my reward once the fighting is done? Pertinella glanced away at Apothecary Vadon, but he simply watched impassively as she took down Horus's words. She wondered briefly if he was as upset as she was at the War Master's anger. As shocked as she was, her ambitious core realized that she had the makings of the most sensational remembrance imaginable, one that would dispel forever the myth of the Crusade as a united band of brothers forging their destiny among the stars. Horus's words painted a picture of mistrust and disunion that no one had ever dreamed of. Seeing her expression, Horus reached up with the shaking hand and touched her arm. I'm sorry, Miss Favar. My thoughts are not as clear as they ought to be. No, she said. I think they're clearer than ever now. I can tell I'm shocking you. I'm sorry if I shattered your illusion. I admit I am surprised by much of what you're saying, sir. But you like it, yes? What you came here for? You tried to deny it, but the sight of the dying Primarch gave her pause and she nodded. Yes, she said. It's what I came here for. Will you tell me everything? He looked up at her and met her stare. Yes, he said. I will. That was an exciting end to the chapter, huh? Kind of climax there at the end with the music and everything else. What do y'all think? Unfortunately, my throat is starting to get raw from this. And I believe the ambitions I set forth is of finishing this book today is not going to happen. So because I didn't really have a plan for tomorrow, we will probably continue this ambition to finish it tomorrow. Thursday is going to be Total War Warhammer 3 as the Chaos Dwarves. Friday is going to be Skyrim. That being said, my throat is actually really dry and scratchy, as I'm sure y'all can tell. When I saw the title, I was kind of skeptical. I mean, it's about false gods, you know? But as I'm sure y'all can tell, is that my throat is just kind of like, at this point. I read a lot faster when I'm not talking out loud as well, like I would have finished this book the first day of. So that being said, I believe it's probably best if we conclude our stream today here on this day. That we have hit chapter 11 of part 2. Answers, a devil's bargain, anthemine. Anathemy. So that is the part that we've hit. We've made it over. We read over 100 pages today. We're at 205 out of 207. We're at page 205 out of 407. So we started off the day at about page 86. So we read quite a bit today. Reading, I really enjoy reading to you guys. I do. I actually do. However, it's not like when I'm gaming and I'm just sitting here making weird noises. I'm also not really used to talking this much. But we read a lot of pages today. And we're slowly watching the downward spiral of the Emperor's beloved son, Horus. As like the whole reality of everything is slowly starting to come and sink in. So I believe that is a good point for us to call the stream. Mostly so that way I can sit in silence and lubricate my throat for tomorrow and drink plenty of water. So, I'm gonna shift the focus here. I got somebody we can raid. So, he's raided us before. He makes some really great music if you're into it. A great guy. Absolutely fucking extremely energetic, so it's gonna be a shift in focus here. He's playing Crab Champions. He's very energetic, and he typically does shots on a raid, but given that it's noon for him, I don't know if he will, but we're going to find out. So we are going to go and raid the 5th element. Crab Champions. You play as a crab with a gun. It's actually pretty great. So we're going to go raid the 5th element, and Have some raid commands here. Yep, my throat and larynx and vocal cords are basically spent for the day. We're gonna go raid the 5th element. Y'all need to hang out, vibe check him. Very, very energetic dude. He also does Dungeons and Dragons on his stream, so if that's something that you're wanting to get into, absolutely 100% check him out on that. I think he does Dungeons and Dragons like every Friday or Sunday, I forget. I'd have to look at his schedule. That being said, I will absolutely catch you guys tomorrow with more of the Horus Heresy, and maybe we'll get into some Dark Tide, or we'll start with Dark Tide and then get into some Horus Heresy. So, yeah, I'm going to stick it in emote and sub-only mode, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Wiedersehen, bonne nuit, au revoir, arrivederci. Sayonara. Adios. I'm trying to remember how to say goodbye in Dutch, but I don't remember it.
Zones. All right, back to the game. You guys ready? Money for sure. Money, money, money.